They disagree on everything: colors, furniture, schedules, the weather, even who started the war. But no one expected that every argument would spark something dangerous. And when two sharp minds collide under the same roof, the result is bound to be explosive and unexpectedly sweet. The sound of rushing water was the first sign that Sienna Lawson's day was about to go catastrophically wrong. She had been sitting cross-legged on her brother's pristine leather sofa, laptop balanced precariously on her knees, reviewing architectural blueprints for a client presentation scheduled for next week. The apartment was quiet, peaceful even, exactly what she needed after 3 chaotic weeks of settling back into Boston after 5 years away in Chicago. Her brother Marcus had been generous enough to let her stay temporarily while she apartment hunted, and she'd promised herself she'd be the perfect house guest, organized, quiet, completely unobtrusive. Then the ceiling started dripping. What the? Sienna looked up just as a fat droplet of water landed directly on her forehead. Then another, and another. Within seconds, what had been a gentle drip transformed into a steady stream, then a cascade, then what could only be described as an indoor waterfall. Water poured from the ceiling fixture, drenching the sofa, her laptop, her carefully organized architectural models spread across the coffee table. No, 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 no! Sienna scrambled to her feet, grabbing her laptop and trying desperately to salvage her work. But it was too late. Water was everywhere, spreading across the hardwood floors like an advancing army, soaking into the expensive rug, pooling around the entertainment center. She ran to the bathroom, grabbed every towel she could find, and threw them uselessly at the flood. It was like trying to stop a tsunami with tissue paper. 20 minutes later, Marcus burst through the door, still in his tailored suit from the office, his expression shifting from confusion to absolute horror in record time. What happened? He stared at the disaster zone that had once been his living room. The pipes. Sienna gestured helplessly at the ceiling, which was still dripping ominously. Something burst upstairs. I called the building manager 15 minutes ago, but if this story is touching your heart, show your support. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. Every action helps us keep bringing you new stories full of emotion. As if on cue, the building manager appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand, and an apologetic expression plastered on his face. Mr. Lawson, I'm so sorry. The unit above you had a major pipe failure. The damage is extensive. You're going to need to relocate for at least a month, maybe longer. Marcus ran a hand through his dark hair, the same shade as Sienna's, and let out a long breath. A month, at minimum. We need to gut the ceiling, check for mold, replace the drywall, refinish the floor. The manager rattled off a list of repairs that made Sienna's head spin. She felt guilt settle in her stomach like a stone. This was Marcus's beautiful apartment, his sanctuary from his demanding job as a tech company executive, and now it looked like a water park had exploded inside it. I'm so sorry, she said quietly. If I had noticed sooner. This isn't your fault, Cece. Marcus used her childhood nickname, something he only did when he was trying to make her feel better. But we do need to figure out where we're staying. The manager cleared his throat. The building will cover hotel accommodations if you need. No need. Marcus pulled out his phone. I'll call Brandon. He's always offering his place when he travels for business. He's got that massive penthouse with 4 guest suites. Sienna's head snapped up. Brandon? Yeah, Brandon Rogers. My business partner, remember. I've mentioned him before. Marcus was already scrolling through his contacts, oblivious to the way Sienna's face had gone pale. Brandon Rogers. The name hit her like a physical blow, dragging her back 9 years to a moment she'd spent nearly a decade trying to forget. The university hallway, the armload of architectural models she'd been carrying for her final project presentation. The way her heel had caught on absolutely nothing, sending her sprawling spectacularly across the polished floor, models flying in every direction like architectural confetti. And the laughter. That horrible, mocking laughter that had echoed through the corridor as she lay there, mortified, tangled in foam core and balsa wood. She could still see him, devastatingly handsome even then, surrounded by his group of equally attractive friends, holding up his phone, recording her. Actually recording her humiliation for posterity. She'd heard later that he'd shown the video to everyone at a party that weekend. People had laughed about it for months. Brandon Rogers had become the star of her revenge fantasies. In her mind, she'd concocted elaborate scenarios where she was wildly successful, and he was desperately asking for her help, which she would deny with cold satisfaction. She'd imagined accidentally on purpose spilling coffee on his expensive suit at a professional conference. She'd even once drafted an email she never sent, detailing exactly what she thought of him and his cruel sense of humor. And now Marcus wanted them to stay in his penthouse? Marcus, no. The words came out sharper than she intended. We can just get a hotel. The building will pay for it. Don't be ridiculous. Brandon's place is incredible and he's rarely there anyway. Always traveling for work. Marcus had his phone to his ear now. Plus, hotel rooms are cramped. We'd be on top of each other. This way we'll have space, a proper kitchen. Hey, Brandon. Man, I need a huge favor. Sienna wanted to snatch the phone from her brother's hand. She wanted to explain that Brandon Rogers was the last person on earth she wanted to be indebted to. She wanted to tell Marcus about that horrible day in college, about the humiliation that still made her cheeks burn when she thought about it. But Marcus was already explaining the situation, his face brightening as he listened to whatever Brandon was saying. Are you serious, man? That would be amazing. We really appreciate it. He paused. Yeah, she just moved back a few weeks ago. You'll finally get to meet her properly. I know you guys were at the same university, but different years, right? Different years, that was one way to put it. She'd been a sophomore struggling with imposter syndrome and an armload of fragile models. He'd been a senior business major with too much confidence and a smartphone. Marcus ended the call with a broad smile. All set. Brandon says we can stay as long as we need. He's got a work trip to San Francisco next week anyway. Marcus, really, I think a hotel would be better. Sienna. Her brother fixed her with that older sibling look that meant the discussion was over. Brandon's penthouse has 4 guest suites, a massive kitchen, and a view of the entire city. We're not paying hotel prices when he's offering for free. Besides, he's my best friend and business partner. It would be weird if I didn't accept. Best friend. Of course, Brandon Rogers was her brother's best friend. The universe clearly had a sadistic sense of humor. As Marcus started making calls to arrange movers for their salvageable belongings, Sienna stared at the water still dripping from the ceiling and felt an eerily similar sense of impending disaster. She'd spent 9 years carefully avoiding Brandon Rogers, building a successful career in Chicago, becoming the kind of confident architect who would never trip over her own feet while carrying models. And now she was going to be living in his penthouse for a month. The universe, Sienna decided, was officially playing a practical joke on her, and she had a sinking feeling she was about to become the punchline. Again. Brandon Rogers stood in the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, watching the Boston skyline glitter in the twilight, and tried to remember why he'd agreed to this. Oh, right. Because Marcus was his best friend and business partner, and you didn't say no when your best friend's apartment turned into an aquarium. What Marcus didn't know, what Brandon had successfully avoided mentioning for the past 9 years, was that his little sister was the girl, the one from the hallway, the one with the enormous brown eyes and the architectural models and the most spectacular fall he'd ever witnessed, the one he'd been stupidly, helplessly infatuated with. Brandon could still remember that moment with painful clarity. He'd been walking to class with his friends, feeling on top of the world in that obnoxious way senior-year business majors often did. Then, he'd seen her struggling with an armload of delicate models, her dark hair falling across her face as she concentrated on not dropping anything. He'd wanted to help, had actually been about to offer to carry something for her. Then she'd tripped, and he'd laughed. Not because it was funny, though objectively. The way those models had exploded into the air like some kind of architectural fireworks display had been fairly spectacular. No. He'd laughed because he was 22 years old and completely terrified by the intensity of his attraction to this gorgeous sophomore who didn't even know he existed. The laugh had been pure nervous energy, the kind that erupts when you're desperately trying to look cool in front of someone who makes you feel decidedly uncool. His friends had laughed too, following his lead. And yes, one of them had been recording on their phone, because that's what idiots in their 20s did. And yes, he'd watched that video maybe 100 times, not because he was mocking her, but because it was the only footage he had of the girl who'd been occupying far too many of his thoughts. By the time he'd worked up the courage to actually approach her, the next day with a carefully planned apology and an offer to buy her coffee, she'd transferred to a different section of the only class they shared. He'd asked around and heard she was actively avoiding that jerk who laughed at her. The label had stuck. That jerk. For 9 years he'd been that jerk to Sienna Lawson, and now she was about to walk through his door. The elevator chimed. Brandon turned just as Marcus emerged, pulling a suitcase and wearing his standard confident grin. "Man, you're a lifesaver. The movers are bringing the rest tomorrow morning." "No problem." Brandon stepped forward to help with the luggage, his eyes scanning the elevator for... She appeared like a storm cloud in human form. Sienna Lawson had changed in 9 years, but somehow that made everything worse. She'd been pretty in college, but now she was devastating. Tall and graceful in dark jeans and a cream sweater, her long dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that should have looked casual but instead looked effortlessly elegant. Her brown eyes, which he remembered as warm and expressive, were currently shooting daggers directly at his chest. "Brandon, this is my sister Sienna. Cece, this is Brandon Rogers." The temperature in the room dropped approximately 40 degrees. "We've met," Sienna said, her voice crisp enough to cut glass. Marcus looked between them, confused. "You have?" Briefly. Brandon kept his expression neutral, though his heart was hammering. Same university, different years. Same humiliation, same asshole. Sienna's smile was razor-sharp. "Sienna!" Marcus looked scandalized. "What? I'm just being honest." She turned to her brother, her expression shifting to pleading. "Marcus, I really think we should reconsider the hotel option. We've been over this." Marcus was already wheeling his suitcase toward the hallway. "Brandon, which rooms should we take?" "Any of the 4 guest suites. They're all identical. East Wing has better morning light if that matters." Brandon kept his voice even, professional, like he was discussing a business arrangement instead of housing the woman who'd hated him for nearly a decade. The woman he'd never quite managed to stop thinking about. Sienna was glaring at him with an intensity that should have set his hair on fire. Her jaw was clenched, her shoulders rigid, everything about her body language screaming that she'd rather be literally anywhere else. He'd forgotten how expressive she was, how her emotions played across her face like weather patterns. Right now she looked like a Category 5 hurricane preparing to make landfall. Marcus grabbed both suitcases. "I'll just get us settled. Sienna, come pick which room you want." "I want a hotel room," she muttered, but followed her brother down the hallway. The moment they disappeared, Brandon exhaled and ran a hand through his hair. This was going to be a disaster, an absolute, complete, unmitigated disaster. He should tell her the truth. Explain that the laugh had been nervous energy, not mockery. Apologize for the 9 years of misunderstanding. Try to clear the air like a rational adult. But when Sienna emerged from the guest wing 5 minutes later, alone and furious, rationality went out the window. "Let me make something very clear," she said, marching up to him with her hands on her hips. "I don't want to be here. I think you're arrogant, immature, and apparently my brother has terrible taste in friends. But since I don't have a choice, you're welcome, by the way." The sarcasm slipped out before he could stop it. Old habits. Her eyes flashed. "Excuse me? For the free luxury accommodations. Most people would say thank you. Most people didn't spend their college years being your personal comedy special. That was 9 years ago. And yet, I remember it perfectly." She stepped closer, and Brandon caught the faint scent of something floral. Jasmine, maybe. It made his head spin. "I remember every single second of that humiliation, and I remember you laughing." She was close enough now that he could see the gold flecks in her brown eyes, the slight flush on her cheeks from anger. Close enough that his brain was short-circuiting, torn between the urge to apologize and the contradictory urge to provoke her further just to keep her this close. "Well," he said, his voice coming out lower than he intended, "at least you're memorable." It was the wrong thing to say. He knew it the moment the words left his mouth. Sienna's expression shifted from angry to absolutely murderous. Cece, can you come help me figure out the shower?" Marcus's voice echoed from the hallway. She held Brandon's gaze for one more searing moment, then turned sharply on her heel and stalked away. Brandon watched her go, noting the rigid set of her shoulders, the way her ponytail swung with each angry step, the graceful line of her back even when she was practically vibrating with rage. He was in trouble. Serious, catastrophic. She's going to murder you in your sleep, trouble. And the worst part? He couldn't remember the last time he'd felt this alive. Brandon walked to his bar cart and poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey, then reconsidered and made it 3. If Sienna Lawson was going to be living in his penthouse for a month, he was going to need all the fortification he could get. This was either going to be the best month of his life or the month that finally killed him. Possibly both. He raised his glass toward the guest wing in a mock toast. "Welcome home, enemy." From somewhere down the hall he could have sworn he heard her mutter, "I heard that." Brandon grinned despite himself. This was going to be interesting. Sienna woke up to the smell of expensive coffee and the unsettling realization that she'd slept remarkably well in enemy territory. The guest suite was obscenely comfortable. King-sized bed with sheets that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe, blackout curtains that had actually blocked out the city lights, and a bathroom with heated floors. She'd spent the first night expecting to toss and turn with righteous anger, but instead had fallen asleep the moment her head hit the pillow. Traitor body. She pulled on her robe, a short silk number she'd bought herself as a successful architect gift, and padded barefoot toward the kitchen. Marcus was probably already up. Her brother had always been an early riser, especially on weekdays. The kitchen was empty. Well, not entirely empty. Brandon Rogers stood at the espresso machine, shirtless, wearing only grey sweatpants that hung low on his hips. His back was to her, and Sienna's traitorous eyes immediately catalogued details she absolutely did not want to notice. Broad shoulders, defined muscles that suggested regular gym sessions, a small tattoo on his left shoulder blade that looked like coordinates. He turned, espresso cup in hand, and froze. His eyes traveled down her body in a slow sweep that made her suddenly, acutely aware that her robe barely reached mid-thigh and the silk clung to curves she hadn't intended to advertise. When his gaze snapped back to her face, there was something dark and intense in his expression that made her stomach do an unwelcome flip. "Morning," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "Where's Marcus?" She crossed her arms, which only served to push her breasts up. Brandon's eyes dipped down for a fraction of a second before he deliberately looked at the ceiling. "Early meeting. Left about 20 minutes ago." He cleared his throat. "Coffee? I can make my own coffee." "Of course you can. You're remarkably capable. I'm sure the coffee machine is terrified." There it was, that sarcasm that made her want to throw things at his infuriatingly handsome face. Sienna marched to the espresso machine, acutely aware that she had to pass within inches of his half-naked body. She could feel the heat radiating from his skin, could smell whatever ridiculously expensive soap he used, could see a small scar on his collarbone, and wondered briefly how he'd gotten it. She grabbed a cup with more force than necessary. "Careful," Brandon murmured from somewhere far too close behind her. "That's Italian ceramic. Costs more than most people's car payments." "Then maybe you shouldn't keep your pretentious cups where people can reach them." Maybe my pretentious cups weren't expecting a hostile invasion. She whirled around, which proved to be a tactical error because it put them nose to chest. Well, her nose to his very bare, very muscular chest. She forced her gaze upward and found him looking down at her with an expression that was equal parts amusement and something else, something that made her pulse quicken. "I'm not hostile," she said, pleased that her voice came out steady. "I'm appropriately responding to being trapped in the home of someone who once made my life miserable. 9 years ago. Time doesn't heal all wounds." Clearly. His eyes dropped to her mouth for just a second. "Some wounds apparently just fester." "Are you calling me festering?" "I'm calling your grudge festering." They were standing so close she could count his eyelashes, could see the small flecks of gold in his otherwise dark eyes, could feel the way his breath hitched slightly when she unconsciously swayed closer. "Sienna," Marcus's voice echoed from the entrance. "Did you see my—" "Oh." They jumped apart, like guilty teenagers. Marcus stood in the doorway, briefcase in hand, looking between them with an expression of utter confusion. "I forgot my laptop. Why are you two—" "Getting coffee," Sienna said quickly. "Arguing about coffee," Brandon corrected, "while standing weirdly close together?" "It's a small kitchen," Brandon said at the exact same time Sienna said he was blocking the machine. Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly, but then he shook his head. "Right. Anyway, Cece, don't forget you have that client call at 10. And Brandon, we have the investor meeting at 2. Got it. Brandon moved toward the sink, putting blessed distance between them. Marcus grabbed his laptop from the counter and headed back toward the door. Try not to kill each other before I get home. I'd hate to have to choose which one of you to help hide the body. The moment he left, silence descended like a heavy blanket. Sienna finished making her coffee with mechanical precision, hyper-aware of Brandon leaning against the counter, watching her. She could feel his gaze tracking her every movement. "You know," he said conversationally, "for someone who hates me, you're staying remarkably close to my general vicinity. The coffee is in your general vicinity. You could have waited until I left." "Why should I wait? It's not like you're particularly hard to ignore." It was a complete lie. Ignoring him was proving to be spectacularly difficult. Right. His tone suggested he knew exactly how difficult. "Well, enjoy your coffee. I'll just be in the gym." Shirtless, sweaty, completely out of your way. He said it with such deliberate provocation that Sienna's hand tightened on her cup. "You're insufferable. You're welcome to leave any time. Marcus wants me here. But you don't want to be here." He pushed off the counter and walked toward her. "So why stay, Sienna? Why not just get a hotel room and maintain your proper distance from the enemy?" He was baiting her. She knew he was baiting her. "And yet, because I don't run away from things that make me uncomfortable." "No?" He stopped right in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "What do I make you then? Uncomfortable?" "Yes. Angry, confused, breathless, insane." "Annoyed," she said firmly. His smile was slow and dangerous. "Liar." Then he walked away, leaving her standing in the kitchen, coffee cup trembling slightly in her hand, her heart racing in a way that had nothing to do with caffeine and everything to do with the realization that this month was going to be far more complicated than she'd anticipated. From somewhere down the hall, she heard the gym door close. Sienna looked down at her coffee, then toward the gym, then back at her coffee. "Absolutely not," she told herself firmly. "You are not attracted to Brandon Rogers. You hate Brandon Rogers. He's arrogant and insufferable, and..." The image of his bare chest flashed through her mind. "Oh no," she whispered to her coffee. "I'm in trouble." The coffee, wisely, had no response. Brandon had dealt with hostile corporate takeovers, aggressive investors, and competitors who'd tried to sabotage his company. None of it compared to the psychological warfare currently being waged in his own kitchen. It had started innocently enough. He'd left a sticky note on the fridge. "Please replace the milk if you finish it. B." When he'd returned from work that evening, there had been a note stuck to his note. "Please don't leave passive-aggressive notes. Buy extra milk. S." His response: "It's not passive-aggressive if I'm being direct. Also, organization is not a crime." B. Hers: "Organization is admirable. Control-freak tendencies are not." S. His: "Says the woman who rearranged my entire spice cabinet by color." B. Hers: "It was chaos. You had paprika next to cinnamon. That's practically criminal." S. Now, 3 days into their cohabitation, the penthouse was covered in sticky notes. They were on the bathroom mirror. "Please don't use all the hot water, Danke. Please don't take 40-minute showers." B. The remote control: "Stop hogging the TV." S. "Stop watching tragic architectural documentaries at midnight." B. And his personal favorite stuck to his laptop: "Your music taste is as pretentious as your coffee machine." S. He'd responded by queuing up a playlist of the most aggressively mainstream pop songs he could find and playing them at breakfast. She'd retaliated by reorganizing his home office filing system. It was, Brandon had to admit, the most fun he'd had in years. Marcus seemed oblivious to the tension crackling through the penthouse. He'd go to work, come home, eat dinner, and retreat to his room to work or watch sports, completely missing the way Brandon and Sienna circled each other like particularly attractive predators. But Brandon's assistant had noticed. "You seem different," Rebecca had said that morning during their staff meeting. "Happy, energized. Did you finally take up that meditation class I suggested?" "Something like that," he'd muttered, while his CFO smirked knowingly. Now standing in his kitchen after another long day of meetings, Brandon found himself actually excited to see what fresh hell Sienna had prepared for him. It was concerning. He should be annoyed by her constant intrusions into his space, her rearranging of his belongings, her sarcastic commentary on everything from his tie selection to his reading material. Instead, he was fascinated. The elevator chimed, and he heard voices. Marcus and Sienna, by the sound of it, along with someone else. Female, laughing. Brandon walked into the foyer just as Marcus was helping a woman with 2 car seats balance multiple bags, while a pair of identical toddlers made a break for his white leather sofa with what appeared to be chocolate-covered hands. "No, no, no!" the woman lunged after them. "Ethan, Emma, do not touch anything in this gorgeous penthouse." "Too late," Brandon said mildly, watching a small chocolate handprint appear on his cushion. The woman turned, and Brandon recognized her immediately. Olivia Chen, Sienna's best friend since high school, attorney, sharp tongue, zero filter. He'd met her briefly at a few of Marcus's parties over the years. "Brandon Rogers." Olivia grinned wickedly. "I've heard so much about you." "Nothing good, I'm sure." "Oh, you'd be surprised?" Her eyes gleamed with mischief as she glanced at Sienna, who had gone notably pink. "Sienna's been very detailed in her descriptions of your living arrangements." Sienna shot her friend a look that could melt steel. Olivia, "What?" "I'm just saying, you've mentioned him every single day since you moved in." "Brandon did this." Brandon said that. "Brandon walks around shirtless like he owns the place," which technically he does. "I hate you," Sienna hissed. "No, you don't. You love me. I'm your truth-teller." Olivia turned back to Brandon with an assessing look. "So, you're the infamous Brandon Rogers." "Infamous is a strong word. So is arrogant, yet here we are." She said it cheerfully without malice, while simultaneously preventing her son from climbing Brandon's bookshelf. "Ethan, get down. Sorry, they're feral today. I swear we teach them manners, but they choose chaos." Marcus laughed, clearly comfortable with the chaos. "I'll order pizza. Olivia's staying for dinner." "Wonderful," Brandon said, meaning it despite the chocolate handprints. Olivia's presence meant Sienna would be off balance, and an off-balance Sienna was an interesting Sienna. Dinner was exactly as chaotic as expected. The twins refused to eat anything except the cheese off the pizza. Olivia told increasingly embarrassing stories about her law firm, and Marcus was blissfully unaware of the undercurrent of tension every time Brandon and Sienna's eyes met across the table. "So," Olivia said during a brief moment when both children were distracted by Marcus making animal noises, "how's the cohabitation going? You two haven't killed each other yet?" "The month is young," Sienna muttered. "She's been a model house guest," Brandon said smoothly. "Aside from the psychological warfare via post-it notes." "The notes are necessary communication," Sienna defended. "They're passive-aggressive art. You started it. You escalated it." "Oh my God," Olivia breathed, looking between them with barely contained glee. "You two are completely incompatible," Sienna interrupted quickly. "Oil and water, cats and dogs." "Cats and dogs can actually get along quite well," Brandon pointed out, "with proper motivation." The look Sienna gave him could have started fires. Olivia's grin was absolutely diabolical. "This is amazing. This is better than reality TV. Marcus, are you seeing this?" "Seeing what?" Marcus looked up from where he was helping Emma color. "Nothing," Sienna and Brandon said simultaneously. After dinner, while Marcus showed Olivia something on his tablet and the twins finally crashed on the couch, Brandon found himself alone with Sienna in the kitchen. She was loading the dishwasher with aggressive precision. "Your friend is interesting," he said, leaning against the counter. "My friend has a big mouth. She cares about you. She's a menace." Sienna straightened, pushing hair out of her face, "and she reads way too much into things." "Does she?" Brandon moved closer, unable to help himself. "What exactly is she reading into?" Sienna's eyes met his, and for a moment, something raw and honest flickered in her expression. "Nothing. There's nothing to read into." "Sienna!" "Brandon!" Marcus called from the living room. "Can you help me carry these car seats down to Olivia's car?" The moment shattered. Brandon stepped back, creating distance even though everything in him wanted to close it. Duty calls. Later that night, after Olivia left and Marcus went to bed, Brandon found a new sticky note on his bathroom mirror. "Your friend is surprisingly okay for someone with your DNA, but don't let it go to your head. S." He grabbed a pen and added his response. Does this mean we're not enemies anymore? B. He went to bed wondering if she'd respond. In the morning, there was a note on his coffee machine. We'll always be enemies, but maybe we can be enemies who don't actively plot each other's demise. S. Brandon smiled as he made his coffee. It was progress. Small, grudging, reluctant progress, but progress nonetheless. Sienna stared at her brother like he'd just suggested she wrestle an alligator for sport. Absolutely not. Come on, Cece. You're an architect. Brandon needs his office redesigned. It's perfect. Marcus looked far too pleased with himself over breakfast. The space is dated, the layout is inefficient, and you literally specialize in corporate design. Find another architect. Sienna enunciated each word carefully, hoping they would penetrate her brother's apparently defective skull. Brandon, who had been silently drinking his pretentious espresso and reading something on his tablet, finally looked up. For once, I agree with her. This sounds like a disaster waiting to happen. See? Even he agrees it's a terrible idea. Sienna pointed at Brandon for emphasis. Which is exactly why you should do it, Marcus continued, completely ignoring their protests. You two need to learn to work together. You're living in the same space for at least 3 more weeks. Plus, Sienna, you've been complaining about not having enough local portfolio pieces since you moved back. Damn it, he had a point. Sienna had been trying to rebuild her Boston client base after 5 years in Chicago. A high-profile tech company office redesign would look incredible in her portfolio, and Brandon's company, Rogers Technologies, was exactly the kind of prestigious client she needed. But working with Brandon? The man who left sarcastic notes about her shower duration? The man whose half-naked torso she'd accidentally memorized in embarrassing detail? I'll pay triple your usual rate, Brandon said, not looking up from his tablet. Sienna's head snapped toward him. Excuse me. You heard me. Triple. Plus full creative control, within budget parameters. Now he did look at her, one eyebrow raised in challenge. Unless you're scared you can't handle working with me professionally. Oh, that bastard. He knew exactly what he was doing, knew that she couldn't resist a challenge, knew that questioning her professional capabilities would make her want to prove him wrong. Fine, she said through gritted teeth. I'll take the project. Marcus clapped his hands together. Excellent. You can start today. Brandon's office is a disaster anyway. It's not a disaster, Brandon protested. It's minimalist. It's empty, Sienna countered. There's a difference between minimalist and I have no personality. My office has plenty of personality. If that personality is corporate robot, then sure. Marcus stood, grabbing his briefcase with a satisfied smile. See? You're already collaborating. I'll leave you two to discuss the details. Try not to burn down the penthouse in the process. The moment Marcus left, Sienna and Brandon turned to face each other. Ground rules, Sienna said firmly. This is a professional engagement. I'm the architect, you're the client. You don't get to mock my design choices. I'm paying triple rate. I absolutely get to mock your design choices. Then I quit. You can't quit. You haven't started yet. Watch me. They glared at each other across the breakfast bar. The air crackled with tension, challenge, and something else neither of them wanted to name. Brandon broke first. Fine. I'll try to limit the mocking to constructive criticism. How generous of you. When do you want to see the space? This afternoon I have a client call at 11, then I'm free. Works for me. Meeting at 2 at my office downtown. I'll be there. Sienna stood, gathering her empty coffee cup. And Brandon? Try not to be completely insufferable during this project. I'll do my best, he said with a smile that was absolutely insufferable, but I make no promises. The Brandon's office was exactly what Sienna had expected. Sterile, efficient, and completely devoid of warmth. The space was large, taking up the entire top floor of the Rogers Technologies building. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a spectacular view of Boston Harbor, but the interior looked like it had been decorated by someone who'd read about personality in a textbook but never actually experienced it. Generic grey walls, standard corporate furniture. Not a single personal item except a framed photo of what looked like Brandon with Marcus at some business event. It's worse than I thought, Sienna said, walking through the space with her tablet, taking notes and measurements. Brandon, leaning against his massive desk, crossed his arms. What's wrong with it? What's right with it? This looks like a stock photo labeled generic office space. Where's your personality, your interests? Any indication that an actual human works here? It's an office, not a living room. It's where you spend most of your waking hours. It should reflect who you are. She gestured at the empty walls. Do you have any art? Any color preferences? Anything you actually care about? I care about efficiency. Efficiency isn't a design aesthetic, it's a cop-out. Sienna pulled up her design software, already sketching rough concepts. You need warmth. Depth. Something that says I'm a successful CEO who's also a human being with interests and personality. What if I'm not interested in revealing my personality to clients and employees? Then you're going to end up with another grey box, and I'm going to refuse to put my name on this project. She looked up from her tablet. What do you do when you're not working? Hobbies? Interests? Brandon seemed genuinely stumped by the question. I work out. Read, I guess. I like sailing. Sailing. Finally, something interesting. What else? I collect vintage architecture books. Sienna's head jerked up. You what? Architecture books, rare editions. First prints of Frank Lloyd Wright, Le Corbusier, that kind of thing. He looked almost embarrassed. I know it's nerdy. That's actually really cool. She meant it. Why didn't you mention this before? Because you assumed I was a personality-free corporate drone? Fair point. Show me your collection. It's at the penthouse. In storage. Didn't really fit the minimalist office aesthetic. We're fixing that. Those books should be displayed, not hidden away like some shameful secret. Sienna was already revising her mental designs. Rich wood tones, navy accents to play off the sailing interest, built-in bookshelves for the collection. Maybe some nautical elements, but tasteful, not cheesy. Photos of actual sailboats you've been on, not stock images. She looked up to find Brandon staring at her with an unreadable expression. What? Nothing, just, you're really good at this. The compliment caught her off guard. Oh, thanks. I mean, it's literally my job, so... Still, the way you see space, the way you translate interests into design, it's impressive. Sienna felt heat rise to her cheeks and firmly told herself it was just the afternoon sun through the windows. Well, don't get used to compliments. I'm sure we'll be fighting about paint colors within the hour. Absolutely, but his smile was warm, genuine. I'm thinking beige. I'm thinking you have no taste, and we should start with the fact that beige is not a color, it's a surrender. See? Already fighting. This is going to be a nightmare. Undoubtedly. He pushed off the desk and walked toward her, stopping just close enough to see her tablet screen. Show me what you're thinking. Sienna pulled up her rough sketches, hyper-aware of his proximity. The way he smelled like expensive cologne and coffee, the way his arm almost brushed hers as he leaned in to look. Navy walls here, she said, pointing. Wood built-ins along this wall for your book collection. Your desk angled to face the windows instead of the door. More natural light, better view. Comfortable seating area here for informal meetings. I like it. His voice was quieter now, thoughtful. What about this corner? I was thinking a small gallery wall, personal photos, maybe some sailing memorabilia, but only if you have good photos. No cheesy motivational posters. I have excellent photos, I'll have you know. We'll see about that. They spent the next hour going back and forth, debating everything from lighting fixtures to chair fabrics. Brandon had opinions, strong ones, and wasn't shy about expressing them. But he also listened, really listened, when Sienna explained her reasoning. It was exhilarating and exhausting and unexpectedly fun. By the time they finished, Sienna had a comprehensive design plan, and Brandon looked genuinely excited about the renovation. So, he said as she gathered her things, how soon can you start? I'll get material samples by tomorrow, final designs by end of week. Construction can start next Monday, if you approve everything. I approve. He said it with certainty that made her pause. You haven't even seen the final designs yet. I trust you. 3 simple words that shouldn't have hit as hard as they did. Sienna swallowed. Right. Well, good. I'll see you back at the penthouse. As she walked to the elevator, she could feel his eyes on her back. This project was either going to kill her or completely upend everything she thought she knew about Brandon Rogers. Possibly both. Hey, Sienna. His voice stopped her at the elevator doors. She turned. Yeah? Thanks. For not making this a complete disaster. Day's not over yet. His laugh followed her into the elevator, and for the first time in 9 years, she found herself smiling at something Brandon Rogers had done. This was dangerous territory. Very dangerous territory indeed. Marcus's business trip to New York couldn't have come at a worse time. Or a better time, depending on how Sienna looked at it. Worse because it meant 2 days alone in the penthouse with Brandon. Better because, well, that was the problem. She was starting to think of it as better, which was deeply concerning. The office redesign project had been progressing smoothly, too smoothly. They'd only had 3 major arguments about design choices, which was practically harmonious by their standards. Brandon had even complimented her selection of wood finishes, though he'd immediately followed it with a sarcastic comment about her obsessive attention to grain patterns. She'd responded by ordering the most aggressively patterned accent chairs she could find, just to watch him twitch. Now Friday evening, with Marcus's flight already in the air, Sienna found herself alone in the penthouse wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweater, planning to spend a quiet night catching up on work emails and ignoring her temporary roommate. That plan lasted approximately 45 minutes. What are you watching? Brandon appeared in the living room doorway, changed out of his work clothes into jeans and a navy Henley that should have been illegal. His hair was slightly damp from a shower. Sienna tore her eyes away from how the Henley clung to his shoulders. A documentary about the Bauhaus movement. That sounds painfully boring. It's educational. It's Friday night. You're watching architectural history documentaries on Friday night. He moved toward the kitchen, returning moments later with a bottle of red wine and 2 glasses. That's actually tragic. I like learning. You're hiding. He sat on the opposite end of the couch, not next to her, but close enough that she could feel the cushions shift. Marcus is gone. You can admit you're bored out of your mind. I'm not bored. Liar. He poured wine into both glasses, offering her one. Come on, it's after 8 on a Friday. We're both adults who apparently have no social life. Let's at least pick something entertaining to watch while we drink. Sienna eyed the wine glass suspiciously. Is this a trap? It's a beverage. What kind of trap could it possibly be? The kind where you get me tipsy and mock my taste in entertainment. I promise to only mock you at baseline levels. He raised his own glass. Truce? Just for tonight? Against her better judgment, Sienna took the glass. Fine, but I'm picking the movie. Absolutely not. Your taste is apparently limited to things that put people to sleep. Says the man who probably watches nothing but business documentaries and action movies with 0 plot. Action movies have plots. Bad guy does bad thing, good guy punches bad guy is not a plot. It's the activity sequence. Brandon's laugh was startled and genuine. Did you just insult an entire genre? I insulted your taste. The genre is fine. Okay, architect, what do you suggest? Sienna grabbed the remote and started scrolling. Something with actual substance, character development, emotional depth. So, a romance? No. You're scrolling through the romance section. I'm scrolling past the romance section. Oh, she stopped. Wait, is that the new adaptation of Pride and Prejudice? Please no, Brandon groaned. Anything but period drama. I'll die of boredom. It's a classic. It's people in fancy clothes talking for 2 hours. It's about social commentary and witty banter and... She paused, turning to look at him. Wait, have you ever actually watched Pride and Prejudice? No, and I intend to keep it that way. Coward. His eyes narrowed. What did you just call me? You heard me. You're scared of a period drama. That's actually kind of embarrassing for a successful CEO. I'm not scared. I'm sensibly avoiding bad entertainment. Prove it. Watch it with me. She knew she was being ridiculous, that she was essentially daring him to sit through a movie she knew he'd hate, but the wine was making her bold and his presence was making her reckless. Brandon studied her for a long moment, something calculating in his expression. Fine, but if I'm suffering through this, we're drinking more wine. Deal. 20 minutes into the movie, Sienna was acutely aware of how the couch had somehow gotten smaller, or they'd gotten closer. One of the two. Brandon, to his credit, was actually watching the movie instead of his phone. He'd refilled both their glasses twice, and Sienna was pleasantly warm, relaxed in a way she hadn't been since moving into the penthouse. Okay, Brandon said during a particularly dramatic exchange between Elizabeth and Darcy. I hate that I'm about to say this, but the dialogue is actually pretty good. Pretty good? It's perfect. He's so obviously into her. Why doesn't he just say something? Because he's proud and she's prejudiced. That's literally the entire point. It's frustrating is what it is. Brandon gestured at the screen with his wineglass, and Sienna noticed he was slightly flushed. Just tell her you like her. What's the worst that could happen? She could hate him for 9 years over a misunderstanding. The words were out before Sienna could stop them. Silence. Brandon turned to look at her, his expression suddenly serious. Is that what we're doing? Acting out our own period drama? We're not in a period drama. No, but we are two people who spent years misunderstanding each other. He set down his wineglass. Sienna, next scene is the dance scene, she interrupted desperately, turning back to the screen. This is the good part. She could feel him still looking at her, could feel the weight of words unspoken hanging between them. But then the music swelled on screen, and he turned back to the movie. By the time they reached the second proposal scene, they'd finished the bottle of wine and somehow migrated to the middle of the couch. Sienna's feet were tucked under her, and she was leaning slightly against the armrest, which put her much closer to Brandon than was strictly necessary or wise. Okay, I'll admit it, Brandon said as the credits rolled. That was not terrible. High praise from the film critic. I'm man enough to admit when I'm wrong. He shifted to face her, his arm stretched along the back of the couch. The dialogue was sharp, the characters were well developed, and the romantic tension was what? Palpable. His voice had dropped lower. All that dancing around each other, all those loaded conversations, it's exhausting, just watching it. But that's what makes it romantic. The build-up, the tension. Is it, though? Or is it just two people being too scared to be honest? They were looking at each other now, and Sienna realized with absolute clarity that they weren't talking about the movie anymore. Maybe they needed the time, she said quietly, to understand each other, to move past their initial impressions. And if they never move past them, then they miss out on something potentially incredible. Brandon's hand, resting on the back of the couch, moved slightly. His fingers brushed against her shoulder, so light it could have been accidental. But from the way his breathing had changed, Sienna knew it wasn't. Sienna! Her phone erupted with her ringtone, Marcus's name flashing on the screen. They jumped apart like guilty teenagers. Sienna grabbed her phone with shaking hands. Hey, Marcus. Hey, just landed. Hotel's nice. How are things there? Her brother's cheerful voice was painfully oblivious. Fine, everything's fine. She didn't dare look at Brandon. We watched a movie. You and Brandon? Together? Without killing each other? That's progress. Yeah, progress. Her voice came out strangled. Anyway, just wanted to check in. I'll call tomorrow. Don't burn down the penthouse. Wouldn't dream of it. Good night. She ended the call and finally looked at Brandon. He was staring at his hands, jaw tight, looking like a man engaged in serious internal debate. I should... Sienna started. Yeah, he agreed immediately. Early morning tomorrow. Right, same. Neither of them moved. That movie was... They both said at the same time. You first, Brandon offered. I was just going to say it was better than I expected. That wasn't at all what she'd been about to say, but it was safer. Much better. He stood, creating necessary distance. Good night, Sienna. Good night. She watched him walk toward his room, every line of his body suggesting restraint, control, careful distance. Only when she heard his door close did she let out the breath she'd been holding. She looked at the empty wine bottle, the 2 glasses, the TV frozen on the Pride and Prejudice menu screen. I'm in so much trouble, she whispered to the empty room. From somewhere down the hall, she could have sworn she heard Brandon's door open, then close again, as if he'd started to come back and thought better of it. Sienna picked up the wine glasses and headed to the kitchen, her heart still racing. 3 more weeks in this penthouse. She was never going to survive. Sienna stood in front of her closet, holding up a deep green dress that Olivia had insisted she pack when moving back to Boston. You need to get out of that penthouse, Olivia had said over the phone that afternoon. Go on a date. Remember what normal romantic interaction looks like, because whatever weird tension thing you've got going with Brandon Rogers is not normal. There's no weird tension thing, Sienna had protested weakly. You watched Pride and Prejudice with him, drank wine, almost kissed. We did not almost kiss. The way you described it, you absolutely almost kissed. You're in denial. Which is why you need to go out with Andrew. He's nice, he's age-appropriate, and he's not your childhood enemy. Andrew Chen, no relation to Olivia despite the shared surname, was a financial consultant who'd asked Sienna out at a networking event last week. He was attractive, successful, and had made her laugh exactly once during their 15-minute conversation. It was the sensible choice, which was why now, staring at the green dress, she felt absolutely no excitement whatsoever. You're overthinking a dress, she told her reflection. It's just dinner, with a nice, normal man, who is not Brandon. The dress slipped on perfectly. She did her makeup carefully, pulled her hair into a sophisticated updo, and added the silver earrings her mother had given her last Christmas. When she emerged from her room, she found Brandon in the kitchen, tie loosened, reviewing something on his laptop. He looked up when she entered, and his expression shifted through several emotions too quickly for her to identify. You look... He stopped, swallowed. Where are you going? Dinner. With a friend. A friend. His tone suggested he knew exactly what kind of friend. The kind of friend you wear that dress for? The kind of friend who asked me to dinner like a normal person. She grabbed her clutch from the counter, refusing to acknowledge the way his eyes tracked her every movement. Don't wait up. Wasn't planning on it. But as she walked to the elevator, she could feel his gaze burning into her back. The restaurant was expensive and trendy, the kind of place with minimalist plating and servers who described each dish like it was an art installation. Andrew was waiting at the table, standing politely when she arrived, pulling out her chair with practiced ease. He was perfect on paper, and absolutely, mind-numbingly boring. So I told my client, Andrew was saying, 20 minutes into an explanation of his most recent financial portfolio restructuring, that diversification was key to long-term growth. And he finally understood the importance of... Sienna nodded, made appropriate sounds of interest, and tried very hard not to compare Andrew's monologue about stock portfolios to Brandon's sarcastic commentary about literally everything. Stop it, she told herself firmly. Stop thinking about Brandon. What about you? Andrew finally asked, cutting into his precisely arranged duck breast. What's it like being back in Boston? It's an adjustment. I'm staying with my brother temporarily while I apartment hunt. Marcus Lawson, right? Tech sector. I've heard of him. Good reputation in the business community. Andrew nodded approvingly. Smart move. Staying with family during transition periods. Financially sound. Everything was financially sound to Andrew. Romance was financially sound. Career moves were financially sound. Sienna was starting to suspect his dreams were financially sound. Her phone buzzed. She ignored it. It buzzed again. Sorry, she murmured, checking the screen. Brandon, is the friend treating you well? She should ignore it. She should absolutely ignore it. Her fingers typed before her brain could intervene. Why do you care? His response was immediate. I don't. Just making conversation. Sienna put her phone face down on the table. Everything okay? Andrew asked. Fine. Just my brother checking in. Family is important. Solid support systems correlate with better life outcomes. Dear God. The rest of dinner passed in a haze of financial jargon and discussions about retirement planning strategies. By the time dessert arrived, deconstructed tiramisu that looked like someone had sneezed coffee on a plate, Sienna was mentally calculating the fastest polite exit. Would you like to get coffee somewhere? Andrew asked as they left the restaurant. There's an excellent place nearby with a diverse portfolio of... I think I should head home, actually. Early morning tomorrow. Disappointment flickered across his face. Of course, can I call you again? Sure, Sienna lied because she was a coward who couldn't say no directly to a perfectly nice man, whose only crime was being terminally uninteresting. The Uber ride back to the penthouse felt like an escape. She'd been gone exactly 2.5 hours. The penthouse was dark except for the living room, where Brandon sat on the couch with a book she recognized as one of his vintage architecture volumes. He looked up when she entered, and something flashed in his eyes. Relief? Satisfaction? Before his expression settled into studied nonchalance. Back already? His tone was carefully neutral. Thought you'd be out later. Turns out dinner has a natural endpoint. How was your friend? The emphasis on friend was deliberate. Fine, perfectly nice, very financially sound. Brandon's eyebrow quirked. Financially sound? He used that phrase approximately 40 times, along with portfolio diversification and long-term growth strategy. Sienna kicked off her heels and collapsed on the opposite end of the couch. I think he might actually be a robot, disguised as a human. That good, huh? It was like having dinner with a particularly enthusiastic accountant. So you're saying it was boring. I'm saying I've had more stimulating conversations with my GPS. Brandon's laugh was surprised and genuine. Then why did you agree to go out with him? Good question, excellent question, actually. Because, Sienna said slowly, I thought it would be normal, uncomplicated, easy. And was it? Unbearably so. She pulled the pins from her hair, letting it fall around her shoulders. Brandon's eyes tracked the movement. Sometimes boring is just boring. Sometimes, he agreed quietly, boring is the worst thing something can be. They sat in silence for a moment, the air between them charged with everything they weren't saying. You really do look beautiful in that dress, Brandon said finally. Your friend was lucky. He spent most of dinner talking about municipal bonds. Then he's an idiot who doesn't deserve you in that dress. Brandon stood, gathering his book. Good night, Sienna. He walked past her toward his room, and Sienna caught the scent of his cologne, the warmth radiating from his body as he passed. Brandon? He stopped, turned. Yeah? Were you waiting up for me? His jaw tightened. I was reading. In the dark. In the living room. At 11 o'clock. It's my penthouse. I can read wherever I want. You were waiting up. She didn't know why this pleased her so much, but it did. Immensely. You're imagining things. But the tips of his ears had gone slightly red. Must be the wine from dinner. I didn't drink any wine. Then you're just delusional. Good night. This time when he walked away, Sienna was smiling. She changed out of the green dress, pulled on comfortable pajamas, and was about to turn off her bedside lamp when her phone buzzed. Brandon. For the record, I wasn't waiting up. I was just making sure you got home safely, because Marcus would kill me if something happened to you on my watch. She typed back, Sure, whatever helps you sleep at night. His response came after a long pause. You in that dress is what's going to keep me from sleeping tonight, but I'll manage. Sienna stared at the message, her heart doing complicated acrobatics in her chest. She should not respond, should absolutely not engage with this dangerous flirtation. She responded anyway. Then I guess we're both going to have trouble sleeping. She turned off her phone before he could reply, before she could say something even more reckless. But as she lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, she couldn't stop smiling. Andrew had been perfectly nice, but Brandon Rogers, insufferable and sarcastic and infuriatingly attractive, was never, ever boring. And that, Sienna was beginning to realize, might be the most dangerous thing of all. Sienna woke up feeling like she'd been hit by a truck, backed over by said truck, and then subjected to a lengthy lecture about municipal bonds by Andrew the robot. Everything hurt. Her head throbbed. Her throat felt like sandpaper. When she tried to sit up, the room spun aggressively. No, she croaked to no one in particular. Absolutely not. I don't have time to be sick. Her body disagreed vehemently. She managed to stumble to the bathroom, caught sight of her reflection and immediately regretted it. Her skin was pale except for the feverish flush on her cheeks. Her eyes were glassy, and her hair looked like it had engaged in active warfare during the night. I'm fine, she told her horrifying reflection. Totally fine, just need coffee. The journey from her bedroom to the kitchen took approximately 3 times longer than usual and required her to lean against the wall twice. Brandon was already there, dressed for work in a charcoal suit that should have been illegal, pouring coffee with his usual efficient morning routine. He looked up when she entered and immediately set down the coffee pot. You look terrible. Good morning to you too, Sienna attempted to say, but it came out as a pathetic croak. In 3 strides, Brandon was across the kitchen. Before she could protest, his hand was on her forehead, his palm cool against her burning skin. You're burning up. I'm fine. You're a walking biohazard. His other hand came up to her neck, checking for swollen glands with surprising gentleness. Have you been feeling sick? Just since I woke up. Really, I'm A coughing fit cut her off, violent enough that she had to grab the counter for support. Brandon's arm immediately wrapped around her waist, steadying her. "Okay, back to bed. Now. I have a client call at 10, which I'm cancelling." "Brandon, you can't just watch me." He was already guiding her back toward her room, his hand firm on her lower back. "Get back in bed. I'm calling my doctor." "Your doctor?" "I don't need a doctor. It's just a cold." "It's the flu, and yes, you need a doctor." He steered her to the bed with the kind of authoritative care that made arguing seem pointless. "In. Now." Sienna was too miserable to fight. She crawled back under the covers, shivering despite the fever. Brandon pulled the blankets up around her shoulders, his expression shifting from stern to concerned. "When's the last time you took anything?" "For what?" "Medicine, Sienna. For the fever." I don't know." He muttered something that sounded like "stubborn woman," and disappeared. Sienna closed her eyes just for a moment, and when she opened them again, Brandon was back with an arsenal of supplies. Medicine, water, tissues, a thermometer, and what appeared to be homemade tea that smelled vaguely suspicious. "Okay, General," she rasped. "What's the battle plan?" "First we take your temperature, then medicine, then you drink this tea." "What's in the tea?" "Honestly, I have no idea. I googled flu tea and threw in everything it suggested. It might be terrible." Despite feeling like death, Sienna almost smiled. "You made me tea. Don't get used to it. Open." The thermometer confirmed what they both already knew. 102.3 degrees. "That's concerning," Brandon muttered, helping her sit up enough to take the medicine. His hand supported her back, gentle and steady. "My doctor's coming by in an hour." "You made a house call." "I made a very generous donation to his daughter's college fund. He's making a house call." Sienna wanted to argue about the absurd abuse of wealth and privilege, but the medicine was making her drowsy, and Brandon's hand was still on her back, warm and reassuring, and she was too tired to fight. "Drink the tea," he said, offering the mug. She took a tentative sip and immediately made a face. "This is awful. But medicinal? Debatable." But she took another sip anyway. "Good." Brandon pulled a chair over to the bedside and sat down, loosening his tie. "I'm working from here today." "You don't have to." "I'm aware of what I have to and don't have to do. I'm choosing to work from here." "Brandon, stop arguing with me. You're sick, you're in my house, and therefore you're my responsibility." "I'm not a responsibility. I'm a person." "You're a stubborn person who would absolutely try to work through a 102-degree fever if I left you alone." He opened his laptop, already pulling up emails. "So, I'm staying. Deal with it." Sienna wanted to protest, but another wave of dizziness hit, and she sank back against the pillows. "You're insufferable. You've mentioned that before." His eyes didn't leave his screen, but she caught the hint of a smile. "Get some rest." Saß zu Meisig, though she drifted in and out of consciousness throughout the morning. Each time she surfaced, Brandon was there, adjusting her blankets, bringing fresh water, checking her temperature with a furrowed brow that suggested he was personally offended by her continued fever. When the doctor arrived, Brandon hovered like an anxious parent, asking medical questions with an intensity that would have been amusing if Sienna wasn't too sick to appreciate it. "Influenza A," the doctor confirmed. "She needs rest, fluids, and these antivirals. Should start feeling better in a few days." After the doctor left, Brandon returned with a new batch of terrible tea and an expression of grim determination. "You're going to drink this. It tastes like despair. It's good for you. So is exercise, but you don't see me doing that right now." "Sienna." "Fine." She took the mug, their fingers brushing. Even through the fever fog, she noticed the way his hand lingered a moment too long. By afternoon, the antivirals were starting to work, and Sienna felt marginally less like death. She woke from a nap to find Brandon still in the chair, now reading one of his architecture books instead of working. "You're still here," he looked up. "Where else would I be?" "Work. Your actual office. Anywhere but babysitting a sick person." "I'm not babysitting. I'm—" He paused, seemed to struggle with the words. "Making sure you're okay." "Why?" "Because Marcus would kill me if—" "Don't hide behind my brother. Why are you really doing this?" Brandon set down the book, and when his eyes met hers, they were impossibly soft. Because the idea of you being sick and alone makes me feel like someone reached into my chest and squeezed. Because even though we've spent 9 years as enemies, I can't stand the thought of you uncomfortable or in pain. Because somewhere between the sticky notes and the office redesign and that damn Pride and Prejudice movie, you stopped being the girl from the hallway and became more. Sienna's breath caught. More. So much more. His hand reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead with devastating tenderness. And before you panic or make a sarcastic comment or hide behind our history, I know this is complicated. I know we have approximately 2 weeks left before your brother's apartment is ready. I know everything about this situation is absurd, but I needed you to know. Brandon... A knock on the door interrupted them. Brandon's expression shifted from vulnerable to irritated in record time. "Who the hell is that?" Marcus's voice called from the hallway. "Cece, someone here to see you." Brandon stood reluctantly, moving toward the door. "You should rest. I'll tell whoever it is to come back another time." But before he could leave the room, Marcus appeared in the doorway with a man Sienna hadn't seen in years. "Tyler!" She struggled to sit up, ignoring Brandon's immediate move to help her. "What are you doing here?" Tyler Simmons, who'd been in her architecture program at university and had made his interest in dating her abundantly clear back then, smiled warmly. "Heard you were back in Boston. Thought I'd welcome you properly." He was still handsome. Sandy hair, easy smile, the kind of effortless charm that had made him popular in college. He held flowers and a basket of what looked like gourmet soup. Brandon's jaw could have cut glass. "This is unexpected," Sienna managed, acutely aware of the sudden temperature drop in the room that had nothing to do with her fever. "Marcus mentioned you weren't feeling well." Tyler stepped into the room, somehow not noticing, or deliberately ignoring, Brandon's death glare. "Brought your favorite soup from that place in Cambridge. You remember, the one we used to go to after late studio sessions?" "I remember," Sienna said weakly. "Maybe you should come back when she's not contagious," Brandon said, his voice dangerously pleasant. "Wouldn't want you to catch the flu. I've got a great immune system." Tyler sat on the edge of the bed where Brandon had been keeping vigil all day, with comfortable familiarity. "Besides, I couldn't let Sienna suffer alone." "She's not alone," Brandon said flatly. "I'm here." "Oh, right. You're the friend Marcus mentioned, the one with the penthouse." Tyler's smile was friendly, but his eyes assessed Brandon with clear male rivalry. "Nice of you to offer space." "It was nothing. I'm sure Sienna appreciates it." Tyler turned back to her, reaching out to touch her hand. "You look tired. Have you been resting?" Before Sienna could answer, Brandon was suddenly at the other side of the bed, his hand on her shoulder. "She needs rest now, time for visitors to leave. I just got here, and the doctor said she needs minimal exposure to people, immune system and all that." Brandon's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. "I'm sure you understand." Tyler stood slowly, clearly recognizing he was being kicked out but maintaining his easygoing demeanor. "Of course. Sienna, I'll text you. Maybe we can grab coffee when you're feeling better." "Sure," Sienna said, mostly because she was too tired to process the testosterone-fueled standoff happening in her bedroom. Marcus, who'd been watching from the doorway with growing amusement, escorted Tyler out. The moment they were alone, Brandon turned to her with an expression of barely controlled irritation. "So, Tyler, an old friend from college, who brought you soup and flowers and clearly wants to be more than an old friend. Are you jealous?" "Absolutely not. You look jealous. I look concerned for your health. You need rest, not visitors who want to—" He stopped himself. "Want to what?" Brandon ran a hand through his hair, frustration and something that looked a lot like jealousy warring in his expression. "You should rest. You're avoiding the question. You're still sick, and you're still jealous." "Sienna, I'm not interested in Tyler." The words came out before she could stop them, honest and raw. "I was never really interested in Tyler, even in college. He's nice, but he's boring. Not you." Silence crashed between them like a physical force. Brandon stared at her, his expression shifting through surprise, hope, and something that looked dangerously like want. "Get some rest," he said finally, his voice rough. "We'll talk about this when you're not running a fever, and I'm not 1 second away from saying something I can't take back." He left the room quickly, leaving Sienna staring at the closed door, her heart racing in a way that had nothing to do with the flu. This was getting dangerously complicated. And the terrifying part? She didn't want it to stop. The charity gala was exactly the kind of event Sienna normally avoided. Too many people, too much small talk, too many opportunities for awkward encounters with old university acquaintances who would inevitably ask about her career trajectory and relationship status. But Marcus had insisted, and Brandon had looked at her with those infuriatingly earnest eyes when he'd mentioned he was required to attend, and somehow she'd ended up in a floor-length burgundy gown that Olivia had forced her to buy. "You look stunning," Olivia had declared during their pre-event phone call. "That color makes you look like a gorgeous revenge-seeking goddess." "I'm not seeking revenge. No, you're seeking Brandon Rogers, which is basically the same thing at this point." Sienna had hung up on her. Now standing in the ballroom of one of Boston's most historic hotels, champagne in hand, she was regretting every life choice that had led to this moment. Especially because Tyler kept appearing at her elbow with refills and conversation, and Brandon was watching from across the room with an expression that could freeze hell itself. "So I was thinking," Tyler said, his fourth attempt at securing a proper date. "Maybe next weekend we could—" "Tyler, you're very sweet, but—" "Sienna Lawson! Oh my God! Is that really you?" The voice was loud, slightly slurred, and immediately recognizable. Jessica Morrison, who'd been in their business program and had the unique distinction of being both wildly popular and spectacularly messy. Sienna turned to find Jessica weaving slightly on her heels, champagne sloshing dangerously in her glass, her eyes bright with alcohol and mischief. "Jessica, hi, it's been 9 years. Can you believe it?" Jessica threw her arms around Sienna in an enthusiastic hug that nearly resulted in champagne spillage. "You look amazing. Doesn't she look amazing, Tyler?" "She does," Tyler agreed diplomatically. "And speaking of amazing," Jessica's eyes landed on Brandon, who was making his way toward them through the crowd. Brandon Rogers, the man himself. Brandon reached them just as Jessica launched into what was clearly going to be a lengthy greeting. "Jessica, good to see you." "Is it, though? Is it really?" Jessica giggled, swaying. "Because I seem to remember you avoiding me like the plague senior year after I mentioned that tiny little secret about—" "Jessica," Brandon said, his voice carrying a warning note that Sienna had never heard before. "Maybe we should get you some water." "I don't need water. I need to tell Sienna the truth because it's hilarious and she deserves to know." Jessica turned to Sienna, her expression shifting to something almost sympathetic. "Did you know Brandon was completely, utterly, hopelessly in love with you in college?" The world stopped. Sienna heard the words, processed them, but they made no sense. "What?" "Oh, yeah." Jessica was warming to her topic, oblivious to Brandon's increasingly panicked expression. "Everyone knew. He would literally light up whenever you walked by, talked about you constantly. His friends used to tease him mercilessly about it." "That's enough," Brandon said firmly, reaching for Jessica's arm. But Jessica dodged him, focusing entirely on Sienna now. "The best part, the hallway thing with the models, he was completely devastated after. Kept asking people if they knew you, if you'd talked to him. He had this whole elaborate apology planned with flowers and coffee." "Jessica, stop." Brandon's voice was sharp now, commanding, but the damage was done. Sienna stared at him, her mind reeling. "You were in love with me? Sienna, that's why you laughed, because you were in love with me. It's complicated." "How is that complicated?" Her voice rose, drawing attention from nearby guests. "I spent 9 years thinking you were a cruel asshole who enjoyed humiliating people. I was a nervous idiot who didn't know how to talk to the girl he liked." The confession hung in the air between them, raw and honest, and completely world-altering. Tyler, reading the room with surprising awareness, quietly excused himself. Jessica, finally realizing the magnitude of what she'd revealed, mumbled an apology and stumbled away, leaving Sienna and Brandon staring at each other in the middle of a crowded ballroom. "We should talk," Brandon said quietly. "Not here. Can we—" "The penthouse. Now." And the car ride back was silent, tension crackling between them like electricity. Sienna's mind was racing, replaying every interaction from college through a completely different lens. The way he'd stared at her in classes they shared, how he'd always seemed to be nearby in the library, the expression on his face right after she'd fallen, not mockery but panic. By the time they reached the penthouse, Sienna was practically vibrating with emotion she couldn't identify. Anger, confusion, something that felt dangerously like hope. Marcus's car wasn't in the garage. Working late again, probably. Good. Sienna stormed into the penthouse, Brandon close behind. She whirled on him the moment the elevator doors closed. Explain. Now. Everything. Brandon loosened his tie with jerky movements, his jaw tight. What do you want me to say? That I was a 22-year-old idiot who had no idea how to handle being attracted to someone? That I laughed because I was nervous and scared and completely out of my depth? You could have apologized. The next day, the next week, any time in the 9 years since. I tried. You transferred out of our shared class. You avoided me completely. And then you left Boston, and I thought... He stopped, ran a hand through his hair. I thought I'd lost any chance I ever had. So you just gave up? I respected your clear desire to have nothing to do with me. His voice rose to match hers. What was I supposed to do? Show up and force you to listen? Stalk you until you accepted my apology? You could have done literally anything except laugh at me. I know. The admission seemed to deflate him. Sienna, I know. I've regretted that moment every single day for 9 years. It's the worst thing I've ever done, and I can't take it back no matter how much I want to. They were standing in the living room now, both breathing hard, the space between them charged with years of misunderstanding. Everyone knew. Sienna's voice cracked slightly. Everyone knew you had feelings for me except me? Yes. And the video? I never showed it around. That was Jake, one of my friends who's an asshole I no longer speak to. He thought it was funny. I thought it was the only footage I had of you, which is deeply pathetic, but there it is. Sienna sank onto the couch, her legs suddenly unstable. I built my entire perception of you on a misunderstanding, and I let you because I didn't know how to fix it. Brandon sat beside her, careful to maintain distance. I'm sorry. For all of it. For laughing. For the video. For not trying harder to explain. Why didn't you tell me? When I moved in here, when we started working together. And say what? Hey, I know you hate me, but it's based on a misunderstanding from when I was hopelessly in love with you? That would have gone over well. You were in love with me, Sienna repeated, the words still feeling surreal. Was. Brandon's voice went quiet. Past tense. She looked at him then. Really looked at him. Saw the vulnerability in his eyes, the careful way he was holding himself, the fear that she would reject him completely. Past tense, she asked softly. His eyes met hers. I don't know how to define what I feel now. It's bigger than what I felt at 22. More real. More terrifying. Sienna's heart was hammering so hard she was certain he could hear it. Brandon, you don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know the truth. He started to stand. I'll give you space. She grabbed his hand. He froze, looking down at where her fingers wrapped around his. I spent 9 years hating you, Sienna said slowly, working through emotions in real time. 9 years building you into this villain in my mind. And now you're telling me it was all based on a nervous laugh from a boy who liked me. Yes, that's so stupid. Profoundly stupid. We're idiots. Complete idiots. She stood, pulling him up with her. They were close now, so close she could see his pulse jumping in his throat, could feel the heat radiating from his body. I'm still angry, she said. You should be. But I'm also... She struggled for the word. Curious. About? About what happens now. About what we could be if we stopped being enemies. Brandon's hand came up to her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. What do you want to happen now? I don't know, but I think I want to find out. He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. His forehead touched hers, his breath warm against her lips. Sienna. The elevator chimed. They jumped apart as Marcus's voice called out, Anyone home? Got Thai food? Brandon dropped his hand, stepped back, his expression caught between frustration and something that looked like dark amusement. Marcus appeared in the living room, holding bags of takeout, completely oblivious to the charged atmosphere. Oh, good, you're both here. How was the gala? Sienna, you're home early. Is everything okay? Fine, Sienna managed, her voice surprisingly steady. Just tired. Brandon? Long night, Brandon said tightly. I'm going to skip dinner. I'm going to skip dinner. Early morning tomorrow. He left before Marcus could protest, disappearing down the hallway to his room. Marcus looked at Sienna with confusion. Did something happen? You have no idea, Sienna muttered. That night, lying in bed, Sienna stared at her ceiling and tried to process the evening's revelations. Brandon Rogers had been in love with her. Brandon Rogers had spent 9 years regretting a moment of stupidity. Brandon Rogers had almost kissed her tonight, and she had wanted him to. Her phone buzzed. Brandon, I'm sorry for everything, not just tonight. Everything. She typed back, we wasted 9 years being enemies. His response, then let's not waste any more time. Sienna smiled into the darkness. Tomorrow everything was going to change. She couldn't wait. Morning came with a new awareness that made everything feel different. Sienna emerged from her room to find Brandon already in the kitchen, but now every movement seemed loaded with meaning. The way he looked up when she entered, the small smile that played at his lips, the way his eyes tracked her across the room. Morning, he said, and even his voice sounded different, warmer, more intimate. Morning. She moved toward the coffee machine, and he shifted to give her space, but not before his hand brushed deliberately against her lower back as he passed. It was a light touch, barely there, but it sent electricity shooting through her entire body. Brandon noticed her reaction. His smile turned slightly wicked. Sleep well, he asked innocently. Terribly. She poured her coffee with hands that weren't quite steady. Someone kept texting me. Someone sounds inconsiderate. Someone is standing 3 feet away pretending to be innocent. I would never. But his eyes were dancing with mischief now, and Sienna realized she was seeing a side of Brandon she'd never witnessed before. Playful, relaxed, genuinely happy. Marcus wandered in, already on his phone, completely missing the charged atmosphere. Morning. Brandon, don't forget we have the board meeting at 10. Sienna, are you still good to present the office design mock-ups this afternoon? Absolutely. Great. Also, I'm thinking of ordering in for dinner. Maybe that Italian place. He paused, looking between them with sudden suspicion. Why are you two smiling at each other like that? Like what? Brandon asked. Like you're sharing a secret. You guys didn't have another sticky note war, did you? Nothing like that, Sienna said quickly. Just discussing the office design. At 7 in the morning, while smiling mysteriously. Marcus's eyes narrowed. You two are acting weird. We're always weird, Brandon pointed out. You've mentioned it several times. True. Marcus grabbed his coffee and headed back toward his room. Try to keep the weirdness professional during the presentation later. The moment he was gone, Brandon moved closer, stopping just behind Sienna. His voice dropped to a murmur near her ear. We're going to be terrible at hiding this from him. Hiding what, exactly? She turned to face him, which put them inappropriately close in the kitchen. Whatever this is. His hand came up, fingers catching a strand of her hair and tucking it behind her ear with deliberate slowness. Fair warning. I'm planning to be significantly less professional about my interest in you now that we've cleared up the 9-year misunderstanding. How unprofessional are we talking? You'll have to wait and see. He stepped back with visible reluctance. But first, I have a board meeting, and you have designs to finalize. Adulting is inconvenient. Extremely inconvenient. His smile was devastating. Later, architect. Later, CEO. The office design presentation went flawlessly, which was fortunate because Sienna spent half of it hyper-aware of Brandon sitting at the conference table, watching her with an intensity that had nothing to do with architecture and everything to do with the conversation they'd had that morning. When she finished, the board members applauded, offering enthusiastic approval. Marcus beamed with pride. Brandon's expression was carefully neutral, but his eyes told a completely different story. Excellent work, Ms. Lawson, the CFO said. When can we start implementation? Construction crew can begin next week if we have final approval. You have it, Brandon. Approved, Brandon said without hesitation. It's perfect. After the meeting, as people filed out, Brandon hung back. Marcus was already gone, deep in conversation with the legal team about contracts. Perfect? Sienna raised an eyebrow as she gathered her materials. That's high praise from someone who argued with me for 20 minutes about chair fabrics. The chairs were the wrong shade of blue. They were navy. There are 17 different shades of navy. And you picked number 14 when clearly number 8 was superior. You're ridiculous. You love that I'm ridiculous. He said it lightly, but there was a question underneath. Sienna looked at him, really looked at him, standing there in his perfectly tailored suit, hair slightly mussed from running his hands through it during the meeting, eyes hopeful and vulnerable despite his confident posture. Yeah, she admitted softly. I'm starting to think I might. His answering smile could have powered the entire city. Toiskau back of that evening, Sienna was reading in the living room when Brandon emerged from his office, tie loosened, looking exhausted but satisfied. Long day, she asked. Endless, but productive. He collapsed on the other end of the couch with a groan that was entirely too attractive. Please tell me Marcus made dinner plans. I'm too tired to think about food. He's working late. Something about a crisis with the Tokyo office. So we're alone. Apparently. Silence stretched between them, comfortable but charged. I could order something, Brandon offered. What do you feel like? Honestly, I'm not that hungry, but I wouldn't say no to more wine and another movie. His eyebrow raised. Are you asking to spend the evening with me voluntarily, without Marcus as a buffer? Don't let it go to your head. Too late. My head is already insufferably large. But he was already standing, heading to the wine rack. Your movie choice this time. But if you pick another period drama, I'm vetoing. What if I promise it has action? Period drama with action is still period drama. It's Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet, the modern one with... I know the one. That's acceptable. He returned with 2 glasses and an opened bottle. But fair warning, if you cry, I'm going to mock you mercilessly. If you cry, I'm taking photos. Deal. They settled on opposite ends of the couch again, but this time the distance felt deliberate, intentional. Like they were both aware that being closer would lead somewhere neither of them was quite ready for yet. 20 minutes into the movie, Sienna made the mistake of glancing over at Brandon. He was actually watching, engaged in the story, his expression shifting with the scenes. He caught her looking. What? Nothing. Just surprised you're actually into it. I contain multitudes. He shifted slightly closer. Also, the cinematography is excellent. That's your takeaway, the cinematography? I'm not going to admit the romance is compelling. I have a reputation to maintain. Your reputation as an emotionally constipated CEO. Exactly. But his smile was soft, genuine. They watched in comfortable silence until the balcony scene, when Brandon's hand moved to rest on the couch between them. Not touching her, but close enough that she could feel the warmth of his skin. Sienna's hand drifted toward his, their fingers a breath apart. The tension was excruciating and perfect. When Romeo and Juliet kissed on screen, Brandon's pinky finger hooked around hers, a connection so small and yet so significant that Sienna's breath caught. This okay? He murmured. Yeah. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. More than okay. They stayed like that through the rest of the movie, hands barely touching, the space between them charged with possibility. When the credits rolled, neither of them moved. Sienna, Brandon said finally, his voice low and serious. We should talk about what we're doing here. What are we doing? I don't know. But I know I don't want to mess this up. I already wasted 9 years. I don't want to rush things now and ruin whatever chance we have. She turned to face him fully. What do you want? Honestly, everything. But I'll take whatever you're willing to give. His thumb traced small circles on her hand. I just need you to know this isn't casual for me. Whatever this is, wherever it goes, it matters. It matters to me too. Sienna squeezed his hand. But you're right. We should be smart about this. Take our time. Be responsible adults. Exactly. Even though I really don't want to be responsible right now. She laughed, and the sound seemed to ease some of the tension. Neither do I, but your brother is my best friend and business partner. And I'm still technically a guest in your home. And we have approximately 10 days before your apartment is ready. So we should probably not complicate things more than they already are. Probably not. But neither of them let go of each other's hands. Tomorrow, Brandon said, I'm taking you to dinner. A real date. No more pretending this is just hostile cohabitation. A date. The most official date possible. I'll pick you up from the guest wing like a proper gentleman. That's ridiculous. We live in the same penthouse. I don't care. I'm doing this right. He lifted her hand to his lips. pressing a kiss to her knuckles that made her entire body warm. "Good night, Sienna." "Good night, Brandon." She watched him walk to his room, every line of his body suggesting restraint, control, careful distance. But when she looked down, she found a sticky note he must have hidden under the wine bottle while she was watching the movie. "I'm falling for you. Have been since the hallway. Will continue until forever. B." Sienna pressed the note to her chest and smiled until her cheeks hurt. Tomorrow couldn't come fast enough. The dinner party had been Marcus's idea, a celebration of the successful office redesign completion and an excuse to gather friends and business associates in the penthouse. Which meant Sienna had spent 2 hours getting ready, changing outfits 3 times before settling on a deep sapphire dress that hugged every curve before flowing elegantly to just above her knees. She'd left her hair down in soft waves, added subtle makeup that made her eyes look enormous, and slipped on heels that made her legs look endless. When she emerged from her room, the penthouse was already filling with guests. Olivia had arrived early with her exhausted-looking husband and somehow even more energetic twins. Several of Brandon's business associates mingled near the bar. Marcus was playing host, directing caterers with military precision. And Brandon, standing near the windows in a perfectly tailored black suit, turned as she entered the room. The expression on his face made every second of preparation worth it. His eyes widened, then darkened. His lips parted slightly. For a moment, he looked absolutely stunned, like someone had physically hit him with the force of her appearance. "Cece, you look gorgeous." Olivia appeared at her elbow with a knowing grin. "Doesn't she look gorgeous, Brandon?" Brandon seemed to struggle with words. Yes, gorgeous doesn't quite cover it." "Devastatingly beautiful," Olivia supplied helpfully. "That's closer." His eyes never left Sienna's face. "You look incredible." "Thank you," Sienna managed, acutely aware of the heat flooding her cheeks. "I'm going to check on the twins before they dismantle Brandon's expensive furniture," Olivia said, disappearing with a wink that was entirely too obvious. Brandon moved toward Sienna, stopping just close enough to murmur, "That dress should be illegal." "Is that your professional opinion as CEO?" "That's my personal opinion as a man who's going to have a very difficult time being appropriate tonight." His hand brushed her lower back, barely a touch but enough to send electricity through her entire body. "Fair warning, I'm going to be staring at you all evening." "I noticed." "Good." His smile was devastating. "I want you to notice." The evening unfolded with wine, laughter, and increasingly excellent food. Sienna found herself pulled into conversations with Brandon's business partners, fielding compliments about the office design and questions about her architectural firm. Brandon stayed nearby, his presence a constant, warm awareness even when they weren't directly speaking. Every time she looked up, his eyes were on her. When she laughed at something Marcus said, Brandon's expression softened with fondness. When one of his associates got a bit too friendly, standing too close and monopolizing her attention, Brandon materialized at her side with an excuse about introducing her to someone else. "Jealous?" she whispered as he guided her away. "Absolutely." He didn't even pretend otherwise. "That man was standing entirely too close to you." "Possessive much? When it comes to you?" "Apparently, yes." As the evening progressed, Sienna became hyper-aware of Brandon's every movement, the way he rolled his sleeves up, revealing strong forearms, the sound of his laugh when Marcus told a terrible joke, the moments when he'd pass by her chair and his hand would ghost across her shoulder or along her back, touches so brief they could be accidental but felt entirely deliberate. By the time dinner was served, the tension between them was palpable enough that Olivia kept giving her significant looks across the table. "So, Sienna," one of Brandon's board members said, "how long are you staying at the penthouse?" "Just a few more days, actually. My brother's apartment is almost finished with repairs." "That's a shame," the man continued. "Brandon seems much more relaxed with you around." Marcus laughed. "Relaxed? They spend half their time arguing." "It's called creative discourse," Brandon said smoothly, his eyes meeting Sienna's with private amusement. "It's called Sienna winning every argument," she corrected. "I let you win. You wish you let me win." "See?" Marcus gestured at them. "This is what I deal with constantly." As guests started to leave around 11, thanking Marcus for the lovely evening, Sienna helped clear plates and redirect the catering staff. The twins had long since crashed on one of the guest beds, and Olivia was gathering their things with her husband. "That dress worked," Olivia whispered as she hugged Sienna goodbye. "That man couldn't take his eyes off you all night." Was it that obvious? Only to everyone with functioning eyesight. She pulled back with a grin. "Whatever's happening between you two, don't overthink it, just feel it." By midnight, the penthouse was empty, except for Marcus, Brandon, and Sienna. Marcus yawned, checking his phone. "I'm exhausted. Great party, though. You two cleaning up?" "We've got it," Brandon said. "Get some rest." "Thanks, good night." Marcus disappeared down the hallway. Silence descended. Sienna and Brandon stood in the living room, surrounded by the remnants of the party. Empty wine glasses, scattered napkins, the lingering warmth of conversation. "Come with me," Brandon said quietly, holding out his hand. She took it without hesitation. He led her to the terrace where the city sprawled below them in a sea of lights. The night air was cool, carrying the faint sounds of traffic and distant music. Above, stars struggled to compete with the urban glow. "I've been wanting to get you alone all night," Brandon admitted, turning to face her. The city lights cast shadows across his face, making him look simultaneously familiar and mysterious. "You had me alone several times." "Not like this. Not where I could do this." He stepped closer, his hands settling on her waist, warm through the thin fabric of her dress. "Or this." One hand slid up her back, leaving fire in its wake. "Or tell you that you were the most beautiful woman in that room tonight." "Hell, the most beautiful woman I've ever seen." "Brandon, I'm not finished." His forehead touched hers, and they stood like that for a moment, breathing the same air. "I spent 9 years regretting one stupid moment. And then you walked back into my life, moved into my home, challenged every single thing I thought I knew about myself. You made me laugh, made me crazy, made me feel more alive than I've felt in years." "I still me, Odia?" The words came out in a whisper, her heart hammering against her ribs. His smile was soft, tender. "Do you still hate me?" "I should," she admitted, her hands sliding up his chest to rest on his shoulders. "After everything. But do you?" His thumb traced her jawline with devastating gentleness. "Do you still hate me, Sienna?" She sighed, the last of her resistance crumbling. "No, I can't anymore. I tried, but—" He pulled her closer, one hand cradling her face, the other firm on her waist. "Can I kiss you?" She nodded, unable to form words, her entire body trembling with anticipation. Brandon's eyes searched hers for one more moment, making sure, and then he closed the distance between them. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, like he was afraid she might disappear. His lips brushed against hers gently, questioningly. But when she made a small sound in the back of her throat and pressed closer, something in him seemed to break. The kiss deepened, became urgent, years of tension and want, and denied attraction pouring into this single moment. His hand tangled in her hair, tilting her head to kiss her more thoroughly. Her fingers gripped his jacket, pulling him impossibly closer. His other hand slid down to her hip, pressing her against him until there was no space between them. They kissed like they were drowning and each other was air, like they were making up for 9 wasted years in one explosive moment. His tongue swept against hers and she gasped, which only made him kiss her deeper, more possessively. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Brandon rested his forehead against hers again. "That was—" he started. "Yeah," she agreed, because words seemed insufficient. "Should we—" He gestured vaguely toward the penthouse. "Yes." She grabbed his hand. "Your room now." They made it through the living room, down the hallway, stopping twice because Brandon couldn't resist kissing her against the wall, his hands roaming her body like he was trying to memorize every curve. In his room, he closed the door and immediately pulled her back into his arms, kissing her with renewed urgency. His hands found the zipper of her dress, sliding it down with agonizing slowness. "You're sure?" he murmured against her neck. "Very sure." "You?" "I've never been more sure of anything." The dress pulled at her feet. Brandon pulled back to look at her, and the raw want in his expression made her feel powerful and desired and absolutely beautiful. "You're perfect," he breathed. "Stop talking and kiss me." He grinned. "Bossy." "You love it." "I really do." His jacket came off, then his tie. Sienna worked on his shirt buttons, her fingers trembling slightly with anticipation and nerves and overwhelming want. Brandon reached for his belt, and promptly tripped over his own feet, trying to remove his pants too quickly, catching himself on the bed with a muttered curse. Sienna burst out laughing, the tension breaking into something sweet and intimate and real. "Are you laughing at me?" He looked up with mock indignation. "Revenge for the hallway fall?" His answering laugh was warm and genuine. "Fair. I absolutely deserved that." Then he pulled her down onto the bed, and suddenly nothing was funny anymore. Everything was heat and want, and the slide of skin against skin, and whispered words and gasped names. They made love with an urgency born of years of denial, but also with unexpected tenderness. Brandon's hands were everywhere, worshipping every inch of her body with touches and kisses that made her feel cherished and desired in equal measure. His lips traced patterns across her skin, murmuring words of praise and want and affection between kisses. "So beautiful," he whispered against her shoulder. "Can't believe you're real. Can't believe you're here." She responded with touches of her own, learning the landscape of his body, the places that made him gasp, the way his muscles tensed under her fingers. When they finally came together, it felt like everything clicking into place, like 9 years of misunderstanding and tension and denied attraction had been building toward this singular moment of connection. Afterward, they lay tangled together, both breathless and overwhelmed. "That was," Brandon started. "If you say nice, I'm leaving." He laughed, pulling her closer. "I was going to say, worth waiting 9 years for." "That's acceptable." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, neither wanting to let go. When Sienna woke, early morning light was filtering through the curtains. She was still in Brandon's bed, his arm draped across her waist, his face peaceful in sleep. She studied him in the quiet morning, the strong line of his jaw, the way his hair fell across his forehead, the slight smile that played at his lips, even in sleep. His eyes opened slowly, and when they focused on her, his smile widened. "Good morning, enemy," he murmured, voice rough with sleep. She grinned. "Good morning, enemy." He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her bare shoulder, then her neck, then finally capturing her lips in a slow, thorough kiss that promised everything. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Perfect. You?" "Like I finally did something right after years of getting it wrong." They stayed in bed, talking in whispers, stealing kisses, until the sound of the elevator chiming announced Marcus's early return. "He's home," Sienna said, suddenly nervous. "We should get dressed. Definitely get dressed." They scrambled into clothes, both moving with frantic urgency. Brandon pulled on pants and a t-shirt, while Sienna grabbed one of his button-downs, hastily doing up buttons. "Kitchen," Brandon suggested. "Coffee? Normal morning behavior?" "Coffee sounds good." They made it to the kitchen just as Marcus's footsteps approached. Sienna was reaching for mugs when Brandon caught her waist, pulling her around for one more kiss, which was exactly when Marcus walked in. "I forgot my—" "What the hell?" They jumped apart, but the damage was done. Marcus stood frozen in the doorway, his expression cycling through shock, confusion, and dawning realization at computer processing speed. "My best friend," he said slowly, pointing at Brandon, "and my sister." He pointed at Sienna. "We're just—" He gestured vaguely at them. "Kissing?" "Marcus," Brandon started. "In my penthouse." "Technically it's his penthouse," Sienna pointed out, then immediately regretted it. "Not helpful, Sienna." Marcus ran both hands through his hair. How long has this been happening?" "Define this," Brandon said. "Don't lawyer me right now. You—" He pointed at Brandon. "You've been harboring inappropriate feelings for my sister under my nose. Not under your nose, very much behind your back. Still not helpful." Sienna bit back a laugh, which earned her a glare from her brother. "Marcus, breathe," she said. "It's not that—" "Not that what? Not that big a deal. You're my sister. He's my best friend. This is... He seemed to struggle for words. "This is complicated." "We know it's complicated," Brandon said calmly. "Which is why we were going to tell you eventually." "Eventually? When? At your wedding?" "We haven't planned that far ahead," Sienna said, then caught Brandon's expression. "Wait, have you?" He didn't answer, which was answer enough. Marcus looked between them, his expression shifting from shock to something that looked suspiciously like reluctant acceptance. "You're serious about this," he said finally. Both of you. Yes, they said simultaneously. Marcus sank into a chair, processing. I need coffee, lots of coffee, and possibly therapy. I'll make the coffee, Sienna offered. I'll call the therapist, Brandon added. You're both terrible. But Marcus was almost smiling now. Fine, fine. But we're having a very long talk about this. Ground rules, boundaries. What happens if you break her heart? I won't, Brandon said immediately, his voice serious. I promise you, Marcus. I won't hurt her. Marcus studied his best friend for a long moment, then looked at his sister. Are you happy? Yeah, Sienna said softly, really happy. Then I guess I can't kill him. Marcus accepted the coffee Sienna handed him, but fair warning, you two are going to endure so many jokes. So many jokes. Worth it, Brandon said, catching Sienna's hand under the table. She squeezed back, her heart full. They'd survived 9 years of misunderstanding. They could survive Marcus's jokes. Together. 3 days after Marcus discovered them, Sienna found herself sitting in Olivia's kitchen, watching her friend expertly prevent her twins from using the kitchen island as a trampoline while simultaneously making coffee. So let me get this straight, Olivia said, grabbing Emma before she could scale the refrigerator. You had amazing sex with the man you've wanted for weeks. I did not say it was amazing. Your face, when you talk about it, says it was amazing. Don't interrupt. Olivia handed Sienna a mug. You had amazing sex. He's been wonderful since. Marcus gave his blessing and you're freaking out? I'm not freaking out. You called me at 6 in the morning saying you needed to talk urgently. That's the definition of freaking out. Sienna groaned, dropping her head to the table. What if it's just physical? What if we got caught up in the tension and the novelty of not hating each other anymore, and now that we've actually, what if that's all it was? Did he act like it was just physical? No, he's been perfect. Too perfect. Sienna lifted her head. He brings me coffee in the morning, leaves little notes, kisses my forehead when he leaves for work. He's attentive and sweet and you're terrified. Yes, because what if I'm falling for him and he realizes I'm not worth the 9-year wait? What if this ruins his friendship with Marcus? What if we're great in the moment, but terrible in actual relationship? What if... Okay, stop. Olivia sat down across from her, having successfully contained both children with iPads, a parenting choice she claimed to regret, but employed regularly. Sienna, you're catastrophizing. That beautiful brain of yours is creating problems that don't exist yet. But they could exist. Anything could exist. You could also get hit by a meteor tomorrow. Are you going to avoid going outside? Olivia reached across the table and grabbed her hand. Listen to me, that man is crazy about you. I saw how he looked at you at the party, like you were the only person in the room, like you hung the moon and stars and personally arranged the city lights just for him. That's too much pressure. That's love, you idiot. Olivia squeezed her hand. And you love him too, I can tell. So stop sabotaging this before it even has a chance to really begin. Sienna wanted to argue, but her phone buzzed. Brandon. Missing you. Come home soon. Her heart did that stupid flutter thing it had been doing constantly for the past 3 days. See? Olivia pointed at Sienna's face. That smile. That's not just physical. That's, I'm falling in love, and it terrifies me. I hate that you're always right. It's my best quality. Now go home and stop running from the best thing that's ever happened to you. When Sienna returned to the penthouse, she found Brandon in his office on a video call that looked intense. He spotted her through the glass wall and held up one finger. Just a minute. She nodded and headed to her room, intending to give him space to work. She made it about 10 steps before he appeared in the hallway, having apparently ended his call abruptly. Hey, he said, something sharp in his eyes. Can we talk? Sure. Everything okay? That's what I want to ask you. He followed her into her room, closing the door behind them. You've been distant since Marcus caught us quiet. You barely said 3 words at breakfast, and you've been finding excuses to be out of the penthouse. I had errands. Sienna, don't. His voice was gentle but firm. Don't hide from me, not now, not after everything. She sat on the edge of her bed, unable to meet his eyes. I'm not hiding. Then what's going on? He sat beside her, close but not touching, giving her space even as he demanded honesty. Did I do something wrong? Move too fast? Because if you need to slow down, it's not that. Then what? The words burst out before she could stop them. What if this is a mistake? What if we're caught up in the tension and the forbiddenness of it all? And once that wears off, we realize we're not actually compatible. What if I ruin your friendship with Marcus? What if... Hey, Brandon's hand covered hers, warm and steady. Breathe. One fear at a time. I have a lot of fears. I noticed. His smile was gentle. Let's start with the big one. Do you think this is just physical attraction? I don't know. Maybe. Okay. Honest answer. When you woke up in my arms the other morning, what was the first thing you felt? Sienna closed her eyes, remembering. Safe. Happy. Like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. That doesn't sound like just physical to me. But what if that was just the afterglow or... Sienna. He turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. Look at me. She did, finding his eyes dark and serious and full of emotion she was almost afraid to identify. I have waited 9 years for you, he said quietly. 9 years of regret and wondering and hoping I'd get another chance. This isn't physical for me. This isn't novelty or forbidden attraction or any other excuse your brilliant, terrified brain is creating. Then what is it? It's you, just you, the way you argue with me about chair fabrics and reorganize my kitchen and leave architecture books in my bathroom because you think I need more culture in my life. The way you care about your work, how your whole face lights up when you talk about a design that excites you, how you're fierce and vulnerable and brilliant and scared of being hurt. Tears pricked at her eyes. Brandon, I'm not finished. His thumb brushed away a tear that escaped. I know you're scared, I'm scared too. This matters too much not to be terrifying. But running away from me, pulling back emotionally, that's not going to protect you. That's just going to rob us both of something incredible. What if we don't work? What if we do? He cupped her face in both hands. Sienna, you're still running from me like you did in college, still assuming I'm going to hurt you or leave, or prove you right about whatever worst-case scenario your mind has invented. But I'm not that scared 22-year-old anymore. And you're not the girl who fell in the hallway. I'm still scared. Good. That means this matters. He kissed her forehead, soft and lingering. Be scared. But be scared with me, not away from me. A sob escaped before she could stop it, and suddenly she was crying. Not sad tears, but the overwhelming kind that came from feeling too much all at once. Brandon pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly while she soaked his shirt with tears, and released weeks of built-up tension and fear. I don't want to mess this up, she whispered against his chest. Then don't push me away. His hand stroked her hair, soothing and constant. Let me in, all the way, scary parts included. She pulled back enough to look at him, this man who'd somehow become the most important person in her life despite, or maybe because of, their chaotic history. I think I'm falling in love with you, she admitted, and it terrifies me. His smile was brilliant, transforming his whole face. Well, that's good timing, because I'm already completely gone for you. Have been since the hallway. Will be until forever. That's a long time. Not nearly long enough. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Not the urgent passion of their first night, but something deeper, a kiss that spoke of commitment and patience, and the kind of love that builds slowly and lasts forever. When they broke apart, Sienna felt lighter, like she'd been carrying a weight she hadn't realized was there. So, Brandon said, brushing hair from her face with infinite tenderness. Are you done running? For now, but fair warning, I'm probably going to freak out again. It's kind of my thing. I know it's one of my favorite things about you. That I panic about everything. That you care enough to panic. That you're real and messy and human instead of perfect. He stood, pulling her up with him. Come on. Marcus is making dinner. Apparently he's decided that if we're going to date, he gets to supervise through aggressive cooking. That sounds exactly like Marcus. He's made approximately 40 jokes about us since this morning. Only 40? He's losing his touch. They walked to the kitchen hand in hand, and when Marcus looked up from his elaborate pasta preparation, he grinned. Look who emerged from the emotional crisis. I was about to send a search party. Your sister was catastrophizing, Brandon said, kissing Sienna's temple. That's her superpower. Marcus pointed a wooden spoon at them. Ground rule number 1. No being cute at the dinner table. I can only handle so much. We make no promises, Sienna said, feeling genuinely happy for the first time in days. That night, After dinner and Marcus's increasingly elaborate jokes about their relationship, Sienna lay in Brandon's bed, her official new sleeping location apparently, with his arm around her and his heartbeat steady under her ear. "Hey," she said softly. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not letting me run. For calling me on my fears. For being patient with my chaos. Always." He kissed the top of her head. "We're in this together now. All of it. The scary parts, the messy parts, the wonderful parts. Even the parts where I reorganize your office without asking. Especially those parts." She smiled into the darkness, finally allowing herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this could actually work. They'd wasted 9 years. She wasn't about to waste another day being afraid of the best thing that had ever happened to her. The text from the building manager came on a Wednesday morning, exactly 1 week after Sienna had stopped running from her feelings. "Apartment repairs complete, ready for occupancy." Sienna stared at the message, her coffee going cold in her hand. She should be happy. Relieved even. Marcus could have his space back. She could establish her independence. Everything could return to normal. Except nothing about the past month had been normal, and the thought of leaving the penthouse, leaving Brandon, felt like someone had reached into her chest and squeezed. "Everything okay?" Brandon appeared behind her, his hand settling on her lower back in the casual, affectionate way he'd adopted over the past week. "You look like you just received bad news." "The apartment's ready." She turned to show him the message. "Marcus can move back in whenever he wants." Something flickered in Brandon's expression, there and gone so quickly she almost missed it. "That's great. He'll be happy to have his own space again." "Yeah, great." Neither of them moved. "Sienna." "I should start packing," she said quickly, before he could say whatever he was about to say, before she could hear the rational, sensible suggestion that she should probably find her own place, now that the temporary arrangement was ending. "I have that apartment viewing this afternoon anyway. The one in the South End that my realtor keeps pushing." "You're apartment hunting?" His voice was carefully neutral. "Well, yes. I can't live with Marcus forever, or—" She gestured vaguely around the penthouse, unable to say, "with you," because they hadn't actually discussed what happened next. They'd been living in a beautiful bubble of stolen kisses and shared mornings and nights tangled together, but they'd carefully avoided talking about the future. "Right, of course." Brandon's jaw tightened. "That makes sense." The conversation felt wrong, stilted, like they were both reading from scripts neither of them had written. Marcus emerged from his room, already on his phone, and brightened when he saw the message on Sienna's screen. "Finally! I can stop being a third wheel in my own borrowed living situation. No offense to either of you, but watching you two make heart eyes at each other over breakfast is nauseating." "We don't make heart eyes," Sienna protested. "You absolutely make heart eyes. It's disgusting. I'm thrilled for you, but disgusting." He grabbed his briefcase. "Brandon, we have the investor meeting at noon. Sienna, you're viewing that apartment at 3, right? How did you know about that?" "You mentioned it last week. I have an excellent memory for details that allow me to mock you later." He headed toward the elevator. "Anyway, I'll probably move back this weekend. Give you kids some space to figure out whatever this is." He left, and the silence that descended felt heavier than before. "I should get to work," Brandon said finally. "Big day." "Yeah, me too." He kissed her forehead, a gesture that had become routine and precious, but it felt almost like goodbye. Sienna spent the rest of the morning trying to focus on client emails and failing spectacularly. By the time 3 o'clock rolled around, she'd convinced herself that viewing the apartment was the responsible, adult thing to do. She needed her own space. She couldn't just move in with Brandon permanently after barely a month of dating. That would be crazy. Except the thought of not waking up next to him felt crazier. The apartment building in the South End was beautiful. Historic brick, tasteful lobby. The kind of place she dreamed about when she first moved back to Boston. The realtor met her in the lobby with an enthusiastic smile. "You're going to love this one. 2 bedrooms, renovated kitchen, and the light is spectacular." They rode the elevator to the 4th floor, and Sienna tried to summon enthusiasm she didn't feel. The realtor unlocked the door to Unit 4C, and Brandon was standing in the empty living room. Sienna stopped dead in the doorway. "What are you doing here?" The realtor looked between them with dawning understanding. "Oh, you two know each other. I'll just wait in the hallway. Take your time. She disappeared, leaving them alone in the echoing space. What are you doing here? Sienna repeated. Brandon turned from the window and the expression on his face was raw, vulnerable, and absolutely terrified. Stopping you from making a terrible mistake. Renting an apartment is a terrible mistake? Yes. No. Maybe. He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture achingly familiar. Renting this apartment specifically is a terrible mistake. Why? Because you already have a home. With me. Not as Marcus's sister crashing temporarily. Not as a guest in a spare room. As my partner. As the woman I want to wake up next to every single morning for the rest of my life. Sienna's heart stopped. Brandon, let me finish. Please. He crossed the empty room until he stood in front of her, his hands gentle on her arms. I know this is fast. I know we've only been officially together for a week. But we've also spent 9 years dancing around each other, and I don't want to waste another second pretending this is casual or temporary or anything less than what it actually is. Which is everything. His hands slid down to capture hers. You're everything, Sienna. You make me laugh, you challenge me, you've reorganized my entire life, and somehow made it better in the process. The idea of you living somewhere else, of not coming home to you every day, it's unbearable. Tears pricked at her eyes. Are you asking me to move in with you officially? No. Her heart sank, and then Brandon dropped to one knee in the middle of the empty apartment. Oh my God, Sienna whispered. I'm asking you to marry me. He pulled a small velvet box from his jacket pocket with shaking hands. I'm asking you to stop apartment hunting because you already have a home, with me, forever. I'm asking you to let me spend the rest of my life making up for that laugh in the hallway. I'm asking you to let me love you properly, officially, permanently. He opened the box, revealing a stunning ring, elegant, classic, with a central diamond surrounded by smaller stones that caught the afternoon light streaming through the windows. Sienna Lawson, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the next 9 decades, if we're lucky, being the man you deserve? Will you reorganize my life and argue with me about paint colors and make me laugh until I can't breathe? She was crying now, tears streaming down her face, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. You're proposing, in an empty apartment, that I was supposed to rent. I'm proposing in the apartment where I stopped you from making the biggest mistake of both our lives. His smile was nervous, hopeful. So, put me out of my misery here. Yes or no? You waited 9 years to do everything right, she said, sinking to her knees in front of him so they were eye level. 9 years from a stupid laugh to this moment. Was it worth the wait? She cupped his face in her hands, seeing the man who'd taken care of her when she was sick, who'd left her love notes disguised as sarcastic comments, who'd looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. Every single second. Is that a yes? That's a yes. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll come home to you every day. Yes, I'll spend the rest of my life loving you and arguing about chair fabrics and making you crazy. His laugh was relieved and joyful as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been made for her, like everything about them had been leading to this moment. Then he was kissing her, deep and passionate and full of promise. They knelt in the empty apartment, holding each other, laughing and crying and reveling in the sheer rightness of it all. Hey, so how's the apartment? Oh my God! They broke apart to find Marcus standing in the doorway, his phone halfway to his ear, his expression cycling through shock to realization to absolute joy. Did he propose? Sienna held up her left hand, the ring glittering in the afternoon light. He proposed. My best friend just proposed to my sister in an empty apartment. Marcus looked between them. This is insane. This is perfect. I'm going to be the best man, right? Who else would I ask? Brandon stood, pulling Sienna up with him, his arm firmly around her waist. And I'm giving Sienna away, obviously. I don't need to be given away, Sienna protested. I'm a fully autonomous woman. Fine, I'm walking you down the aisle and then making an embarrassing speech at the reception. Non-negotiable. Marcus pulled them both into a hug. I'm so happy for you two. Even though you're both disasters who took 9 years to figure out what everyone else already knew. What did everyone else know? Brandon asked. That you were perfect for each other, obviously. Marcus pulled back with a grin. So, I guess you're not renting this apartment? Definitely not, Sienna said. And I guess I'm moving back into my own apartment alone. Looks that way, Brandon agreed. And I guess I need to start planning an engagement party. Absolutely not. Olivia will handle that, Sienna said quickly. Thank God. I'm good at many things, but party planning isn't one of them. Marcus headed toward the door. I'm leaving you two to celebrate. Try to keep it PG. This is technically still a property viewing. The moment he was gone, Brandon pulled Sienna back into his arms. So, future wife, future husband. How does it feel? Perfect. Terrifying. Right. She looked up at him. This man who'd somehow become her entire world. How does it feel for you? Like I finally got something right after years of getting it wrong. He kissed her softly. Let's go home. Home, Sienna repeated, loving the way it sounded. The penthouse? Our penthouse now, if you want it. We can look for something new together if you'd prefer. I want the penthouse, I want the view and the kitchen I reorganized, and the bed we share, and every single memory we've made there. She laced her fingers through his. I want it all. Then it's yours. You're stuck with me and my pretentious coffee machine and my terrible taste in music forever now. I can't think of anything more perfect. They left the empty apartment hand in hand, the ring on Sienna's finger catching the light, their future spreading out before them like the Boston skyline, vast, beautiful, and full of possibility. 9 years from a laugh in a hallway to a proposal in an empty apartment. It had been worth every single moment of the wait. 6 months later, the late afternoon sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, painting everything in shades of gold. Sienna sat curled on the sofa, their sofa now in their home, one hand resting on the gentle swell of her belly, the other flipping through paint samples for the nursery. 5 months pregnant, and she was already obsessively planning every detail of their baby's room. Brandon teased her constantly about her nesting instincts kicking in early, but he was just as bad. Last week he'd spent 3 hours researching the safest cribs on the market and had purchased 4 different books on fatherhood. The elevator chimed, and Sienna smiled, knowing exactly who it was even before Brandon appeared, loosening his tie with one hand while holding a bag from her current favorite restaurant with the other. I brought tacos, he announced, crossing to the sofa and leaning down to kiss her thoroughly. Hello, wife? Hello, husband. The words still gave her a thrill, even 3 months after their wedding. A small, perfect ceremony with just close friends and family, where Marcus had cried through his entire best man speech, and Olivia had taken approximately 3,000 photos. Brandon set down the food and immediately placed both hands on her belly, his expression shifting to that soft, awed look he got whenever he touched her there. And, how are my 2 favorite people today? As if in answer, the baby kicked forcefully against his palm. His face lit up like he'd just witnessed a miracle. Did you feel that? That was definitely a kick, a strong kick. Future soccer player, maybe? Or future architect with strong opinions about spatial design? Sienna covered his hands with hers. Your son or daughter has been active all day. I think they inherited your inability to sit still, or your tendency to argue with everything. He leaned down, bringing his mouth close to her belly. Hey there, little one. It's Dad. Just reminding you that when you get here, you're going to be the most loved kid in the history of ever. Fair warning, your Uncle Marcus is already planning to spoil you rotten and teach you all the embarrassing stories about your parents. The baby kicked again, and they both laughed. I think that was approval, Sienna said, running her fingers through Brandon's hair as he stayed close to her belly, or terror at the thought of Uncle Marcus's storytelling. He pressed a kiss to her stomach, then straightened, pulling her gently to her feet. Come on, let's eat before the tacos get cold. They settled at the dining table, the one they'd picked out together, along with everything else in the penthouse that now reflected both their styles. Sienna's architectural sketches covered one wall. Brandon's vintage book collection lined the shelves. Their life together was visible in every corner of the space. How was your day? Brandon asked, serving her tacos with the attentiveness he'd adopted since discovering she was pregnant. He'd become almost comically protective, monitoring her food intake, making sure she rested, hovering whenever she did anything more strenuous than walking. Good. Finished the Copley Square project designs, met with the contractor about the timeline. She took a bite and groaned with pleasure. These tacos are perfect. How did you know I was craving exactly this? Because you've been craving them every Tuesday for the past month. I'm learning the patterns. That's slightly concerning. That's being an observant husband. He reached across the table to take her hand. You look beautiful today, by the way. Did I mention that? You did. This morning, this afternoon via text. And now, you're becoming predictable, Rogers. Rogers Lawson, he corrected. They'd both hyphenated their last names, a compromise that had made Marcus laugh and declare them the most indecisive married couple in history. The elevator chimed again, and Marcus's voice called out, "I'm here, don't be naked." "We're eating dinner," Sienna called back, "fully clothed." Marcus appeared, carrying a large gift bag and wearing a grin that suggested trouble. "Hello, soon-to-be parents. Uncle Marcus has arrived with presents." "You brought more presents?" Brandon stood to hug his best friend. "You were just here 3 days ago with presents." "Yes, but these are important presents." Marcus set the bag on the table and started pulling out items. First, a onesie that says, "My uncle is way cooler than my dad." Second, a book called Avoiding Your Parents' Mistakes, a guide for infants. And third, he pulled out a framed photo of Brandon and Sienna from college, the infamous hallway incident captured from someone else's camera angle, a reminder of where it all began. Sienna burst out laughing. "You did not frame the hallway photo." "I absolutely did. This is going in the baby's room so they can know their parents' love story started with public humiliation and 9 years of denial." "That's not going in the nursery," Brandon said, but he was grinning. "It absolutely is. It's family history." Marcus grabbed a taco and sat down. "So 5 months halfway there, are you two freaking out yet?" "Constantly," Sienna admitted. "Yesterday, Brandon spent an hour Googling how to tell if you're going to be a good father. And Sienna has reorganized the guest room, the nursery, 4 times in 2 weeks. It needed to be perfect. It was already perfect the first time." Marcus watched them bicker with obvious affection. "You two are going to be amazing parents. Neurotic, definitely, but amazing." "Says the man who just bought a onesie mocking his best friend," Brandon pointed out. "The baby needs to know the truth early." Marcus's expression softened. "But seriously, I'm really happy for you both. Seeing you together, building this life, it's everything I hoped for when I convinced you to stay here, Cece." "You didn't convince me," Sienna protested. "The flood convinced me. I encouraged the flood through sheer force of will because I knew you two needed to be trapped together." He raised his water glass. "To Brandon and Sienna, to babies and love stories and 9 years of absolutely ridiculous pining." They clinked glasses, laughing. After dinner, Marcus left with promises to return next week with more embarrassing gifts, and Sienna and Brandon retreated to the bedroom. She changed into comfortable pajamas, Brandon's old college t-shirt that now stretched over her growing belly, while he set up the pillows exactly how she liked them. "Come here," he said softly, pulling back the covers. She climbed in, and he immediately curved around her, one arm draped protectively over her belly, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Comfortable," he murmured. "Perfect." She laced her fingers through his. "Brandon? Are you scared? About the baby?" "Terrified." His hand spread across her stomach. "But also excited and grateful, and so in love with you and this little person we made that I sometimes can't breathe from it." She turned in his arms to face him. "We're going to be okay, all 3 of us." "I know, because we're in this together." He kissed her forehead, then her nose, then finally her lips. 9 years from enemies to this, it's kind of miraculous. 9 years of not knowing what we were missing. She traced his jaw with her finger. "But we found our way here eventually. Best mistake I ever made was laughing in that hallway. Best mistake I ever made was hating you for it. We're both disasters. Perfect disasters." She kissed him again, slow and sweet. Together. The baby kicked between them, making them both laugh. "Someone's agreeing with you," Brandon said, his hand moving gently over her belly. "Someone has good taste." They lay like that as the sun set over Boston, the city lights beginning to twinkle below, their little family safe and warm, and exactly where they belonged. In the morning there would be breakfast with terrible coffee puns from Brandon, more paint samples to review, client calls and board meetings, and all the beautiful mundane details of life. But tonight there was just this, The three of them wrapped in love that had survived misunderstanding and time and fear. From enemies to lovers to partners to parents, it had been worth every single moment of the journey. "I love you," Sienna whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Brandon replied, his voice warm and certain. "Both of you. Forever." And as sleep claimed them, wrapped around each other with their hands resting on the promise of their future, they knew with absolute certainty their story was only just beginning. Leave your comment and share this story with someone special. It truly helps us keep bringing new stories to you. And if you want to follow every chapter of this emotional journey, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Your support